Okay, if everybody can find a seat or get situated, we're going to get going here in a minute or so. All right. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank everybody that showed up here today. This is an important part of the process that's been going on for several years now, frankly, and it has a ways to go as well. So we have some decisions to make here in the city of Keene, or these folks in front of you, your elected representatives, the city council. They have a decision to make, and this is an important decision for Keene, an important decision for the entire region, and I think we're all here for that reason. So it feels like almost a couple, 6 months ago, I think I originally had this conversation about the seriousness of the infrastructure needs we have in the downtown with the city staff. And for me personally, it almost felt like I was hearing about a major surgery that a family member of mine had to have. I wasn't happy about it. I tried to deny it first, talk to court and say, does this really need to get done? And then I went through the sort of anger phase. This is really going to hurt our downtown businesses. How are we going to get through this as a community? And then bargaining. And I said, well, could we push it back for a couple of years? Maybe the next mayor would like to take this on. And then finally, acceptance. And I realized that it was incumbent on me, and it was incumbent on your current elected officials to take on this challenge of having this really difficult and emotional conversation about what we're going to do with our beloved downtown. And so we set out on a process to do that. We set up a steering committee, which is common for projects of this size and scope. We tried to grab a few folks from around the community to come together and start to take the universe of options, the universe of ideas, and narrow it down into something manageable, a starting point, if you will, not a final decision. So we went through that process and we worked with our consultants here at Stantec, and they're going to describe a little bit more about the work they've done and the feedback that we've received as a city in a little bit. But we went through that whole process and we came up with an option. The steering committee did a great job in that they did what they were told to do. They came up with a viable option. And we all know that what's there now is a viable option, and there are some alternatives that are now on the table. I don't know where this is going to end up. But we have to get to a decision, and that's what this is all about. This part of the process is about listening to you all here, listening to the community, having the city council hear you out, hear about your concerns, hear about your questions, because there are lots of things that I don't know. There are lots of things that all of us don't know. And so I appreciate you all coming to the table. Lend your expertise, your thoughts, your ideas, your experience. Some of you have lived here your entire life. You've seen thousands of cars go around that rotary roundabout-ish thing we have. I want you to share that experience, and I can tell you that these people right here are desperate to hear what you have to say. So tonight, for this part of the process, at the head table, we have several members of the city staff, as well as our representatives from Stantec, the firm that we've hired to go through some of this stuff and help us through this process. We're going to start with a 30-minute PowerPoint presentation that Stantec and our city staff will give to sort of review where we're at, how this started, where we're at, and then also give some sort of broad overview of some of the options that have come up. We've heard a lot of great ideas over the past couple months, a lot of them coming from you. Ultimately, those ideas need to be discussed and decided upon by the city council, which is why maybe we're not going to go into the depth that we will on some of these ideas. I know for a fact city councilors are going to bring up new ideas to this, and that's their responsibility. So after this 30-minute presentation, we're going to invite people to come up to one of these two microphones, state your name and where you come from for the minute taker, and try to keep it to about 3 minutes. We've got a lot of people here tonight, and I want to make sure everybody is heard. So try to keep your comments to about 3 minutes. If you have a lot more to say, there might be some time at the end, but you can also fill out one of the comment cards in the back and submit that. And you always have that opportunity. Your comments will go into the public record, and I know that the city councilors will read them. We're going to go to about 9 o'clock tonight. I tend, in all my years of doing these kind of public meetings and everything, I find that after 9 o'clock, everyone sort of zones out a little bit. And so that's going to be the end point for us tonight. At the March 2nd City Council meeting, the council is going to decide how they want to receive all this information going forward, and ultimately how they want to gather information, get themselves comfortable with this project, comfortable with the ideas that have been brought forward, any potential changes, and ultimately get them to a decision on these surface level options. And there are a lot of different ways that could happen. And ultimately, the council has to decide how they want to move forward there. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to our city staff who are going to manage this process. Important to note, though, this is not like a public hearing or a public city council meeting. That's going to come later. This is what I would call a public comment session. Our councilors are here to listen, but they're not here to participate. Having them deliberate about an issue that they're going to vote on is a very separate process. So I'm asking that the council just listen tonight. And other than that, all of us are available for you to talk to. They don't have to wait for an event like this to talk to us. Every city councilor here has an email address that's publicly available online. You can certainly reach out to me and my office anytime. I welcome it. And other than that, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, good evening, everyone. I am, those who may not know me, I'm Cor Blomquist. I am the Public Works Director, Emergency Management Director for the city. I've been out doing this work for about 30 years. It's hard to kind of believe that. And I know a lot of you in the room here because we've been together and done a lot of different projects, and it's always exciting as we move through these. So this evening, as the Mayor indicated, we'll first be going through a presentation. At the end of the presentation, as I reemphasize, as the Mayor indicated, folks can come up. We're not necessarily going to be picking people. You can start coming up and provide your comment, and once you're done, then the next person behind can do it. If you do have a issue, we do have our Assistant City Manager, Rebecca Landry, has volunteered that if someone needs a mic brought to them, she can assist you in that particular aspect. She's in the back of the room right now. So, and again, I thank her. I also thank the other city staff who are here this evening. There's many of them scattered around the room. Up with me this evening, I'm going to start off certainly with our city engineer, Don Lucier. He's always involved in all the projects. I'm going to let Ed Robert, who is from Stantec, introduce his team when he comes up to give his presentation. And then again, after the end of the presentation, certainly we'll answer those questions that we can. There may be questions that we can't answer right now based on the level of design and at the point that we are in the particular project. But again, I do want to thank you all for coming out. I know tonight's going to be a little messy. From the public works person, tomorrow night you may want to get the popcorn, maybe one of your favorite beverages, and hang out at home. It's going to be a little more messy Wednesday into Thursday morning. So please be safe on those days. My crews will be out and about tonight and probably Wednesday night. So there's your be in the know kind of from public works. So with that, Ed, introduce your team and talk a little bit about the project.
I would love to. Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you, Mayor and members of council and staff. My name is Ed Roberge, and I'm a principal engineer with Stantec and with our community development group, which does these types of projects, and we're really excited about it. Bob Corning is our design team lead. He'll spend a lot of time talking about some of the options and some of the feedback that we got. And then Dave McNamara, also a project manager with the team. He's been heading up the infrastructure effort and has a lot of big and long insight with conditions and options. So you'll be seeing that. He's been working closely with Don Lucier on the project. So just a brief outline on the agenda. The mayor obviously just welcomed everybody here. We'll talk a little bit about the project itself as in an overview and the process. Our outreach and engagement, we started this project back in April, so we've been at it for a little while, and we've talked to a lot of folks, and it's great to see this amount of folks that are here. following up from the number of people that were at the January 30th meeting. That was fantastic. We'll talk about issues and concerns and what really drove some of the conversations about this project. Its preliminary design, that's what was presented following several iterations of review and alternatives with the steering committee. And then a little bit about project schedule, and then really opening it up for more public comment, because that's really what we're here for tonight, is just to understand really what this project is all about in terms of what the community what the community needs are, and what are some of the issues and constraints. So as I said, we really kicked this project off in April. And it was our initial phase was really to gather a lot of data. A lot of you might have been involved with us early on. Data gathering, survey, evaluations, a number of studies, whether it was crosswalk safety, whether it was traffic modeling, or it was a tree study. All inclusive, we looked at the entire quarter, and we'll go through that a little bit here, really to identify issues and concerns. And how do we address those concerns as they reflect to the project goals? We started our first public workshop back in June. And there was a little over 100 folks that attended, both inside and outside. We were at council chambers and we were at Railroad Square. It was good feedback, and we got some information here tonight that we'll want to share on that. That's really what got us to launch and started looking at defining and refining the project goals. That's what it was really all about. That led up to our second public workshop back in October. And that gathered all the public comments that we had and then brought forth some alternatives. And from that pace, starting at that point, we looked at alternatives with the steering committee, the August meeting, the September meeting, the October meeting, leading up to the preliminary design that we'll look at tonight, which was the steering committee's consensus consideration. So with this process, that followed on to the January 30th meeting. And then we're here tonight. So we continue to evolve the project. I share this slide here on project goals, and that's really important, what really drives what we heard. You know, we started with a set of goals that were defined to us through the RFP process, our hiring process that we came through. Looked at those, and I'm not going to go through them word by word, but they really start to define and shape some of the concerns that you folks have, and then some of the needs and some of the wants that came out of the discussions. And whether or not that's expand flexible open space, because you like to use your downtown as flexible as you possibly can and host a lot of events, that becomes a really important piece. So these are the guiding principles of really what this project is. So with this, you know, we start really to look at some of the resources that go into city planning. So this is just a list of a few. There were dozens of plans that have been done over the years that we've looked at. I would say that the Keene Comprehensive Master Plan is one of the important. That really defines the vibrancy and the activity that the community really wants to see in downtown. And that's what's driving this project, is the need, not only the need for infrastructure, but then what is the future of downtown? We looked at the Keene Complete Streets Planning and Design Guidelines. We looked at modeling the future with the Keene Arts Corridor. That was a body of work that really expanded, you know, not only in downtown, but how to connect other sections to downtown in this arts community that you have. It's strengthening connections with respect to downtowns and Keene's trails. We have a slide on that today that you guys have a really unique set of trails that interconnect not only neighborhoods, but also coming through your downtown. And the Cheshire Rail Trail is really a feature spine. Not a lot of communities have that, and you guys should be really proud of that. And then, of course, the Keene Capital Improvement Plan. Where did this project come from? This project came from great planning by leadership at the council level and leadership at the staff level. These are planned program improvements that are needed. Now we're trying to address the concerns that follow that. So this is a slide. I hate to use slides that really just have a lot of text, but this is this was the complexity of some of the issues and concerns that we looked at. I'm not going to read them all, but if you just imagine some of the issues, reliable utility infrastructure, and our staff over here with DPW they've been chasing their tails over the last 4 or 5 years on utility issues, and replacements are beyond need now. They're at a critical moment, and having said that, that's really driving some of the other opportunities that are here. We heard about traffic concerns. We heard about pedestrian safety concerns. We heard a lot about the image and character of Keene, and no matter what happens here, maintaining that image and character is first and foremost. And I can certainly tell you that, our team from Stantec, we would never promote change for just change. This is a community-based process, and understanding, we're here to try to understand. We don't live here, but we try to understand as we were a member of this community. And image and character becomes a really, really important piece. So adding to that, I'll get started here, and I'm going to ask Dave to come up and talk a little bit about this infrastructure replacement project. And you can see it. It's pretty extensive. All those lines that you see is work that's about to be done, and we just want to make you understand the significance of that. So Dave.
Thanks, Ed. My name's Dave McNamara with Stantec, and as Ed mentioned, I'll start to talk a little bit about the utilities. What you see here is really kind of the scope of work, the extent of the work that we're expecting to do on the utility infrastructure. And so the infrastructure includes city-owned utilities, water, sewer, drain. There are private utilities. The gas company has some lines they'd like to upgrade. There's some work with some of the cable companies that'll get done, and some of the Eversource might have a little bit of work as well. But primarily what we're looking at here are the city-owned utilities. So in green is the sanitary sewer, and you can see there's replacements throughout there. There are some sections of sewer that were lined about 15 years ago. Those will remain in place, but the sections that are left are old, they're undersized, so those really need to be replaced. Similar with the water in blue, you can see throughout the whole area. Some of the water lines are over 100 years old now. If anybody came over to the table we had at the meeting a couple weeks ago, you could see what some of those lines would look like in the field. So there's an obvious need to replace a lot of these. Similar to the sewer, there are some sections of existing water main that we don't have to get into, and those will remain in place. And then the storm drain is the orange, and that's pretty extensive as well. As you know, there's puddling issues, there's drainage issues, there's some small ponding issues out within the project area. Some of the drain system up around Central Square is starting to cave in, so there's definite drainage issues out here that need to be replaced. So what this really shows is kind of the extent of the work and how much pavement's going to be disturbed, sidewalks are going to be disturbed to do all this work, to replace the main lines, to replace services to the individual buildings. So what happens is we're going to really get into all that pavement, all that disturbance, and so now's the opportunity. What do we want to put back? Do we want to put back what's here? Do we want to look at some alternatives? And that's really what we're here to discuss and get feedback on. So in addition to the city utilities, as I mentioned, there's a gas line down at the south end and some gas line work in Central Square. There's some electrical work that we're proposing. We'll add some conduit in for future use for the city, for lighting, any number of potential future needs for electrical, as well as cable companies that don't have infrastructure in the right-of-way now are going to want to come in with us. So we're coordinating with those private utilities as well. So I think that's really the main utility work that we're looking at. And I will turn it back to Ed.
Great, thanks, Dave. And as Dave mentioned, just coordination with and for a more reliable utility infrastructure in downtown, that's looking at what exists today and what exists or what the needs are tomorrow. I'm going to jump into a number of slides here that kind of emphasize some of the issues and concerns that were part of the study that we did. So this is just a slide on crosswalk safety. And really a lot of concerns expressed by folks with some of these mid-block crosswalks. These are crosswalks that happen kind of mid-block, not at intersections, that, you know, obvious, you know, it's not typically a vehicle, a motorist would be anticipating that there could be pedestrians crossing at intersections, vehicle intersections, but mid-blocks are always ones that are individual threats. Some of the crosswalks have an extremely excessive length, which actually contribute really at the intersection, just at the bottom of Central Square. I mean, this crosswalk alone is, you know, in excess of 100 and probably close to 140 feet wide. So it's very difficult to cross that at one signal time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also this, you know, poor lighting, puddles at tip downs. You know, this is just a state of good repair and concern. So looking at future needs, when you're looking at an infrastructure that is that complex and that disruptive, it's really, this is a great idea to identify some other issues that can be solved at that same time. And then the double threat. So the double threat, there's a graphic here that's just showing, you know, the two-lane road that Main Street is, and we see this often, where the pedestrian at the curbside will start to go, but the inside vehicle that's coming along may not see them until the last second. Some communities have big issues with this, with speeds. I wouldn't say that there's a high fatality rate here in Keene for this, but there's a lot of near misses. We hear that from folks quite a bit. So these are some identified issues. Also, traffic operations. So we did a full traffic study as part of our studying effort to look at, you know, what are the traffic volumes within the corridor, within the downtown work area or the project area, and that's you see here really from Central Square down to Water Street. We want to understand what are the issues related to queuing and delays, particularly at the traffic signal at Main, West, and Roxbury, and what contributes to some of the confusion, lack of pavement markings. So the photo in the upper right is really, it's a very wide open pavement. There were markings a number of years ago, but that adds to some of the confusion. Some might argue that with that confusion, it slows people down. And there's been a lot of studies about that actually do relate to that. But in this case, when we looked at that intersection, you get this unique phenomena that happens here during the peak hour. This is a PM peak hour at the beginning of October. That's a shot that I took, where there's vehicles queued all the way down to Eagle from the intersection in the 5 o'clock hour. And the other lane is wide open. And that other lane is wide open because of that. I think one thing that contributes to that is obviously the signal is not really optimized. It's on old timing, and it does need to be upgraded. But also, where are those vehicles going, and how are they getting to there? There's a confusion, so this creates this issue, this long queue. The other piece here that's important to note is the current use with the fire department. It uses, as an emergency access, the traffic signal is there. It's called fire preemption. The signal goes all red, but the vehicles go across traffic. They go in the wrong direction on that piece of Washington Street. And that's necessary with the way it's set up right now. It's not the safest, but it is obviously necessary. So looking at that as a constraint, that becomes very, very important. We heard a lot about bicycle facilities. And I mentioned before kind of the network of trails and how this all kind of centers around what we call ground zero or that Cheshire Rail Trail at Maine. Having some sort of connectivity and bike facilities became important to some within the groups that we talked to. They talked about safe bike access. So right now, Main Street is designated as a shared use road. That's what these blue dashed lines are. It's a sharrow, so you would expect bikes in the road, but that would be behind parking in most cases here. Washington Street does have a dedicated bike lane that's outbound from downtown, and that's a nice feature, but that's really the limit of what you have for bike facilities. There's certainly limited bike storage and parking capacity in downtown. And then that trail path connectivity, how could that be part of a feature point and allow safe crossing through and to downtown. That's part of the problems that we heard. Other issues and concerns really kind of relate to the tree study that we did, and that was directly part of the image and character issues that we heard. I'm going to ask Bob to come up here and talk a little bit about this tree study, because this became a really important tool that will guide us in our design.
Thanks, Ed. Good evening, everybody. Bob Corning. I'm a principal with Stantec and landscape architect. Yeah, so as Ed mentioned, obviously the existing tree canopy is a really important character-defining feature of the downtown. We retained Bartlett Tree Experts. They're a national tree arborist company that does tree inventories and assessments. And they inventoried and assessed every single tree in the downtown work zone area. They looked at a lot of different characteristics, but one of the things that they did do was categorize the trees by condition class. So you can see the green, yellow, and red, good condition, fair condition, poor condition. Poor condition trees are usually either diseased or have some kind of structural problem. Fair condition trees are most normal trees, and then good condition trees are trees that are thriving. And so one of the things that we're going to do as we go through these options is to look at opportunities to save as many of the good condition and fair condition trees as we can. They also gave recommendations for existing trees to remain, a maintenance program. And so that would be included in any project, any scope and spec that we provided for the permanent project. We would also make sure that trees that we're going to keep are protected during construction. And then also, we want to make sure that any trees that we're proposing that are new trees have the conditions to thrive. So they have adequate soil volumes, adequate water, access to water, drainage, and other issues that would ensure that the trees thrive and survive over time. Because trees are a living thing. The canopy in the downtown is extremely important, and it's important that we have a routine to get the trees started from the beginning and growing up to be mature. Back to Ed.
We like to get other voices involved in the conversation, so it's not just mine. But this is just a slide that really started to garner some of the public input preferences. In our study back in June, or our public workshop back in June, we presented some of these things that we heard about. Placemaking and wayfinding is lacking in downtown. Expand low-impact development green infrastructure. These are some comments that directly came from you folks. And then we assembled that in a way that we could have folks look at some typical downtown activities that happen. And this is really what garnered. So when you look at the top, even just call it the top 5, particularly the top 2, flexible street space and outdoor dining and activity on the street, which, I would say that post-COVID or even during COVID, that ushered in a new use of downtowns and streets and sidewalks that I think all cities and towns that we've certainly been involved in, and even my own hometown, have really embraced that use now, that becomes now a need. And people like that. People want to be outside, and expanding that was clear and a really a consistent, every time that we talk to folks, those 2 top notes there were really important. Creating opportunity for green infrastructure, really instead of just, throwing all of our stormwater to rivers and streams, how do we harvest that and put it back into the ground and use it for irrigation and all those other things? I think there's some good opportunity to look at that and improve water quality in the downtown core. And then lastly, protected bike lanes. So, that piece there, is certainly, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that component of a multimodal corridor is how do we treat other transportation alternatives, and that will be coming up. So with all of these issues and concerns, and these are just a sampling of some, we engaged the steering committee, as I said, starting back in August, and all the way through December, we worked closely, and all of those alternatives and all of those options are all on the city's webpage, on the downtown webpage. You can see that. You can also see all the issues and concerns that are here that we're showing. So I would direct you to the city's webpage to get a wealth of knowledge with all of these graphics here. But what came out of that December meeting was the steering committee considering those alternatives and weighing the options and coming up with what we would now call, as the mayor referred to, is the starting point. Here's the starting point on the preliminary design that we're trying to capture some of the most important functions of what we're talking about. And we'll talk a little bit in detail quickly, but in detail, the Main Street design, looking at it as a multimodal corridor with protected bike lanes. So dedicated, protected bike lanes, you'll see what that means. Angle parking, we had alternatives that had parallel parking. That was one thing that was consistently the concern with parking. Parking is very, very important. We understand that. We know the community really understands that and needs that. The downtown businesses, that's really important. So we maintain the angle parking design feature throughout the core and in a multi-lane operation. We looked at other opportunities for single lane and multi-lane, and the steering committee rose that to the top. We talk about Central Square, the roundabout intersection, and how that would compare to the existing condition, leaving it as is, essentially, or looking at a larger signalized intersection. And we also looked at expansion of the Central Square Common to the north, and you'll see that shortly. And then at Gilboa Railroad, the talk about trying to, create that Cheshire Rail Trail feature, expand flexible open space, use of for community use. So that one-way operation in a raised intersection connecting Gilboa and Railroad Square together, you'll see that featured as well. That seemed to be fairly well received. So here's the overall preliminary site plan for the corridor. And you can see that it's a multimodal corridor. The green marks here are the bike lanes with our angle parking and with our roundabout at Central Square with much shorter crosswalks, the safety component. With crosswalks, we reduced the number of crosswalks to make them better and to make them safer where we could. Well, we can make them all safer, not where we could. And then this larger area right here at Gilboa and Railroad, which really tie those two feature places together. So before I start talking about this, you'll see we have these character areas. This was a really important component of the steering committee's review, where they really weren't interested in a one project fits all. Like you had to do all of this stuff. So understanding that we have some really significant feature points like Main Street, like Central Square, like Gilboa and Railroad, those are all unique, what we call character areas. So that gives the decision makers, the steering committee, in this case now the city council, the options to pick and choose and build the project that they think they want. So we call them character areas. You're going to see a character area on Main Street. And again, we had some definition along the way as the wanting a vibrant, charming, welcoming, multimodal corridor. And that's really what this is. So we'll start on the Main Street. And this is the existing condition perspective. So it's kind of like an angled bird's eye view of Main Street. That's what it looks like today. 2 lanes, angle parking. You got parking in the center of the corridor. In the trees, you have a really robust tree. I don't know if you remember on that slide that Bob was just talking about on the tree study. The tree study had focused on 156 trees downtown. That's unique. There's not a lot of downtowns that have 16 or 20 trees that sometimes come into play. So this is really impressive. And our goal now is to not only make sure that as we evaluate alternatives, we evaluate those alternatives with trees in them. And here's the preliminary design as it was laid out in the site plan that you just saw. Again, this was the basis of the steering committee's collaboration, but it's showing 2 lanes in each direction, angle parking. The parking in the middle of the corridor in this section has been removed. That was a safety concern, but You can see that there's a lot of trees that are still in there, and you can see the bike facilities along the side too. At the bottom, you can start to see the raised intersection at Gilbo, and at the top, you can see this, essentially the roundabout. So this is the corridor design as we've talked about, and certainly as was presented and reviewed at the January meeting. Parking. Parking is very important, here, everywhere. And this was a component that we did as a detailed parking study. And this just happens to be an inventory map of all the parking that's within the corridor, not only within our work area, but also on the outside, so the Gilbo area, you know, down on Wells Street and Roxbury Plaza, and even up just beyond Vernon Street and Mechanic Street. So we took all of these 900 some odd spaces, and not that that was as important as what's really happening along Main Street, and we looked at utilization, understanding where the heaviest utilized spaces are, because not every parking space is equal. But we had to go through that. And this is just a summary of that. And this is a big table, but a summary table of the parking as it relates to, on a block-to-block basis, on the preliminary design. So these are northbound block-to-block, southbound block-to-block. And in the end, we have 167 existing parking spaces, and as a result of the preliminary design layout, there's 15 less spaces. We maintained the 11 handicap spaces. We thought that that was important, and we'll evaluate the number of needed accessible spaces in a final design effort, but that number, the 141, drops on the standard spaces. And it's mainly focused in the area of the roundabout and the deflections and the intersection controls that happen. So a lot of those spaces were right at the front of Main Street. So that's a quick summary. I'm going to hand this to Bob now to talk about the next two character areas and Central Square and Gilbo. So thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Ed. So similarly to Main Street, we identified some characteristics of this character area, Central Square, civic, formal in the village center, as you all know. So this is the proposed concept currently. And what happened was when the roundabout idea was introduced as a preferred option for this intersection at Main Street West and Roxbury, it provided the opportunity to close off the northern leg of the circle to expand Central Square to the north. To do that, you need to make Washington Street two-way and Court Street two-way, and then that provides a five-legged intersection into the roundabout. The dashed line that you see here is the existing limits of Central Square now. Everything within the existing Central Square is remaining: the gazebo, the fountain, the statue, as well as all the trees. But it does provide you the opportunity to expand the green space further north, to expand the green space. We're suggesting a multi-use zone that could be used for various events, but also potentially for service, for emergency access, potentially for programs and events at the church, weddings and funerals. We're suggesting that the sidewalk, the narrow sidewalk along the existing buildings get widened, and really creates a much more larger multi-use flexible open space. And as you can see here, we're gaining about almost 14,000 square feet of additional space. The parking that's being lost along the north edge of the square is being replaced with angled parking, both on Washington and at Court. The parking that exists, the angled parking on the outsides on Washington and Court, are remaining. So this is a section looking, if you were looking east, so West Roxbury would be on your left here. This is the existing Central Square, about 160 feet long. The existing roadway is about 54, and the sidewalk's about 16. So you can see in section how that expansion of Central Square to the north would gain that 54 additional feet. Similar to the perspectives on Main Street, This is a perspective of existing conditions looking north, if you were hovering above Main Street, looking north to Central Square. And then this is the view of the current concept, where you have Main Street coming up north, the roundabout, obviously. The teal color are the bike routes, the bike paths, as are currently proposed. And then you can start to see the expansion of Central Square to the north. Same design, but just a different view. This is almost as if you were hovering over City Hall, looking over to Central Square. The expanded open space here, the multi-use zone, and the expanded sidewalk zone in front of the buildings, with the added angled parking on both sides. And all of the existing features within Central Square are remaining. And then this is kind of a photo simulation that we call it, taking an existing photo and then adding in the proposed improvements. So you can start to see how the image and the character of the square is actually maintained, but then also expanded to the north. So the multi-use zone and the sidewalk across the edge, and then the new angled parking. So Gilboa and Railroad, Ed mentioned that we were really inspired with some of the goals about creating additional multi-use zones, flexible open space, expanding on some of the uses that Railroad Square currently provides. But also, there was a lot of work put in from the Arts Commission, the various arts communities about this arts district idea. And we really thought that that was an exciting idea. So what is currently being proposed, the current option, is this is Railroad Square here. But taking that concept of this kind of open plaza space and applying it to Gilboa from Main Street to St. James. And in this plan, we're proposing that Gilboa goes one way. It's be one way from Main Street westbound. And then at St. James, it would go back to a two-way condition. And what that allows us to do is to reduce the roadway width. We would keep the existing parking, or at least replace the existing parking with what's currently there. But the idea is that this would all be flush. It'd be a flush condition so that the sidewalk was flush with the roadway, and we call it coplanar. And that would provide the opportunity to have multiple use, flexible open space. This could easily be closed off, and then this could be a really pedestrian-centric zone for the city. And then similarly, doing a similar condition on Railroad Street north of the plaza space, so that, again, we would maintain the existing parallel parking for daily use, but this whole zone would be coplanar. And then we also took that another step forward, further, and connected Railroad and Gilboa with a tabled intersection on Main Street. So you would have this coplanar flush condition for this whole zone, this whole district of the downtown, which we think is really exciting. And again, this is existing conditions. Looking northbound, Gilboa is to the left, Railroad here, and Railroad Square is here. The rail trail cuts across right here. And then this would be the proposed condition, where you can see the addition of the multi-use of the dedicated bike lanes, both northbound and southbound. This would be the rail trail connection, so you have those connections from a multimodal perspective. And then this would be the tabled intersection that would connect Railroad and Gilboa. And similarly, this is if you were hovering above Railroad Square, looking over towards Gilboa. You can start to see how parking is being accommodated, the existing parking is being accommodated on Gilboa on that side of the street. That's it. I think I'm handing it over to Dave.
Thanks, Bob. So I'm just going to talk briefly on the project schedule. So has been noted, we started back in the summer, back in June publicly, and really started to work with the city a little bit before that. We went through the fall, developed some alternatives, incorporated the feedback that we had heard over the summer, had another outreach program in early October, and then we've gotten to where we are kind of now in the winter. We've narrowed the alternatives a little bit. We're here presenting where we are and looking at what the next steps are going to be. So the intent really is to continue through into the spring, work through this process with the council, at some point come to an agreement on what's going to move forward, And if everything stays kind of in line, we'd be looking at phase one of construction in 2024, with a design period really lasting through 23, phase two of construction into 25, and then a third phase of construction into 2026. So with that, back to you.
Yep. I'm just going to go through, again, pretty quick here. But this is just feedback that we got, some really great feedback from the January meeting that really focused on pedestrian safety within roundabouts, the emergency vehicles in and around roundabouts, bike safety and use on the sidewalks, and then essentially project constructability. We're early in the phase of this project to start talking about construction, but we know that it's a real issue and a real concern to most folks. So there was a lot of questions and concerns essentially about, the size of the roundabout that's proposed versus the other roundabouts. And this was a graphic that was provided at the January 30th meeting. I think it's important to note, this is Main Street at Winchester, the upper left here. This is about 157 feet wide, okay, in a pretty geometrically perfect circle shape. The difference here is that because of the geometry and because of the shapes and the approaches of the roads, we don't necessarily have the room for a true circle, but you do have a 145-foot by 105-foot roundabout, which is pretty large. And folks asked us, well, how does that compare to Court at New Acres Road or Court at Maple? We would say that that's significantly larger. The Court Street is about 120 feet or so. This is again another smaller roundabout that's in the 120 range there. So it is a much larger roundabout. I mean, it's near the same dimension of the two-lane roundabout at Main Street on the end, and you can see that it has two-lane operation in that northbound movement. Just to process traffic, to either Roxbury or Washington, or essentially Court or West. So it's the size of the roundabout is pretty comparable to that same roundabout that's at the other end, just geometrically arranged in a slightly different manner to support vehicles. We heard a lot about pedestrian safety in roundabouts, and these are really good comments. And a lot of it had to do with, right now, people get to that intersection, and they're used to the push button. They push a button, all lights go red, and they cross the street. That introduces a lot of delay along the way, but, what we were hearing was, well, what if somebody is visually impaired or has a challenge and is really difficult? So these are just some solutions. I know the graphic is kind of small, but essentially, it's a push-button guidance that would have what we call RRFBs, or rapid rectangular flashing beacons, that alerts drivers to be cautious. You do have somebody. It is state law that you yield to somebody that's in a pedestrian that's in a crosswalk. So you have different types of signals that can be utilized. And that would need to be analyzed, okay? You look at traffic volumes, you look at the pedestrian volumes, you understand that. So we've done a lot of projects that look like this, that have that same feature, and that really essentially helps, because there's two things that really tie into the issue. And pedestrians with vision impairments, not only do they struggle with making sure that they can see and get to the intersection, but also recognizing if the vehicle has yielded. And tools like this, like this traffic signals that we're seeing, those are good options. We also heard a lot about emergency vehicle safety, and this is just a really quick tool here that rules kind of using a roundabout, that if you have not entered a roundabout, just simply pull over to the right, and that's what this condition is doing right here. Emergency vehicle is approaching, don't enter the roundabout. If you have entered the roundabout and an emergency vehicle is coming up behind you, just get to the nearest exit and then pull over, and the emergency vehicle simply just goes by. We were asked, essentially, sorry, wrong one. we were asked, what about our roundabout? You know, how does our roundabout? So what we did was we took, you know, working with the fire chief, here's the Keene Fire, this is their vehicle, their tower cyclone vehicle, that we essentially, it's actually not a cyclone, but we're showing the same thing. There's a vehicle parked here, and this gray line is the track of the fire truck, as dimensioned. So this is a situation, even if a vehicle panicked and got to this position right here, well, that's why you have a truck apron here, and the lane width in our situation allows the fire truck to simply pass. And then certainly if a vehicle got to this point and then stopped, the fire truck could still pass through. So we thought that this was really important to share, that mechanically, this roundabout works with a fire truck in most conditions. This also works with trucks, delivery trucks. We know that there's a frequency of trucks that are out here, so that's important to maintain. We heard about concerns with bike safety, and particularly with, you know, the bikes that would be on the sidewalk. And there's just a few pointers that that we did explain to folks at the time of the meeting, but I just wanted to graphically show folks, and we can support that. But essentially, if vehicles must yield to pedestrians and bikes within the corridor. So if a bike or a pedestrian is crossing the street, they must yield. And then pedestrians also must yield or watch for bicycles when crossing the separated bike lanes. So a lot of folks were saying, okay, if I park in these angle spaces and there's a bike lane that's immediately adjacent to those spaces, you know, what happens? What needs to happen? Well, you really should be, you know, as if you were crossing any type of a street or other travel way. There's some guidance that, you know, just look both ways, and make sure that you do your best. When you get to crosswalks where there's pavement markings within the bike lane, which I'm showing right here as an example photo. This is a photo from Seattle, but it's showing really the same thing, is that where pedestrians are expected at crosswalks, there's pavement markings within the bike lane that really guides that. And this is kind of what that looks like, where you would have, this just happens to show parallel parking, but with the angle spaces, you'd be coming over what would be potentially a pretty open area with one single direction. I think that's how that guidance works. So there's just a little bit of information there. There was some safety studies, and I can certainly, anybody can approach me after and talk about some of those safety studies. Really the last piece here that I think is important, and I was gonna hand it to Bob, but I'll just go quickly here, is the use of sidewalks and the current use of space. This is really, you know, what we're talking about is limited opportunity for more sidewalk cafe opportunities or sidewalk commercial use. Any of that sidewalk commerce, that's really important. Anything that we do, we really need to make sure that we maintain that or enhance that, create those opportunities. We also talked about universal accessibility from parking component, from crosswalks, sidewalk conditions, and access to businesses and storefronts. It's really a good opportunity to look at those conditions at this time and see how many problems we can solve that relate to that. And lastly, I'm going to just fire through this, Dave, and we can answer questions. But the phasing plan that the city staff and Dave's team has been working on, really the message here is that if it's three-phased, you know, not the entire downtown corridor would be taken up or encumbered at one time. You'd have sections that would be worked on, and others that would remain in business as usual. And if there's one thing that we hear, not only here, but other places as well, is the fear of what happens when construction starts. And these are real fears, you know, for businesses. And the need to make sure that those doors remain open and access remains open, and there's reasonable parking that could still be utilized. Those are all really important. That's why that whole public process doesn't end just here. It really begins when we get into the final design phase and how this thing gets constructed. So at that, these are comments that are here. We're not going to speak to them because we're going to hear from everybody here tonight. But that is our summary. And I think we went a little bit long, but I think that was detailed, and we're trying to understand the feedback that we got and try to address some of the concerns that came out of the January meeting. So thank you very much.
Oh, great, thank you, Ed. And as the mayor mentioned earlier, we're now going to be opening it up for the public comments. Again, there is not a minute taker, but it is being broadcast and it is being recorded. So again, we just do ask if you just mention your name, where you're from, and then go ahead and speak. Assuming folks will come up, do their piece, and then let the next person behind them sort of to move in. So deep breath, stretch a little bit, and we have a microphone on both these ends here. And again, I think the idea is going to be we're going to have the side to the left make their comment, then I'll go to the side to the right, back and forth, and we'll go from there. So with that, do I see a thumbs up that we're ready? On the right, on my right, the left-hand side? All right, go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Elsa Worth, and I'm the priest at St. James Episcopal Church on West Street. And I want to begin by commending you on all of this creative work. Obviously, so much has gone into it. It's very exciting. I'm here tonight representing my clergy colleagues and the many lay members of the congregations around town at Monadnock Interfaith Project. And we decided to show up to suggest that when the plumbing under Main Street is being ripped up and replaced, it's a good time to include thoughtful plans for a public bathroom kiosk or two in the downtown area. And in the years since the clergy and others last petitioned Keene to consider public restrooms, the design and technology of public toilets has advanced, taking smaller footprints, increasing their attractiveness inside and out, and creating more ease of maintenance. Many cities across the globe, all in Europe, many in Canada, and now many in the United States, are catching on that installing public restrooms revitalizes downtowns because people are more at ease to continue strolling and browsing for longer periods. They're a welcoming sight for tourists who don't know the town, and those who have restroom urgency issues of one kind or another are hesitant to go downtown may find it possible if attractive public restrooms are accessible. And public bathrooms would encourage physical fitness, as people like me who like to take long walks around Keene often plan our routes to include places where we know we can find a pit stop. So public restrooms also, I want to point out, meet the stated goal that you have shared about universal access. It lets everyone enjoy the downtown. A nicely designed and planned restroom has benefit for the entire community, certainly offers citizens respect for their bodily needs. A porta potty may do in a pinch or at a parade, but it does not offer the message of we care about you and respect you. Rather, it says, here's all you can have to the people who are unhoused, who are some of the people that would definitely need this facility. But what I would really like to see in this grand plan of improvement and beauty is to include an intentional piece that addresses real human needs. So my clergy colleagues and I urge you, as you make more definitive plans for Main Street, to include some modern public restroom kiosks in that plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am?
Good evening. I'm Jane Taylor. I live in West Keene. And just to start, I've reviewed everything I could. I didn't go to the first two public meetings, one I was away for. I filled out the online survey. I've left comments. I don't think anybody has any kind of, I shouldn't speak for everybody, but opposition to the infrastructure improvements. I think everybody is aware that that needs to happen because there's a greater cost if it doesn't happen. But I am really, really concerned about the plans for the square. and the presentation tonight has just reinforced my concerns. The expansion of the green area northward, to me, it defies logic. I don't think it's going to improve pedestrian safety, as pedestrians will still have to cross to get, streets to get to it. And not only that, but they'll have to cross two-way traffic instead of one-way traffic to get to it. I know you've done traffic studies, but I have real concerns that that mini rotary, as I call it, will be able to handle the projections of traffic. With the two-way traffic on either side of the square, I think that creates even more problems for angle parking, because now people are going to have to look in two directions to make sure it's clear to back out, because not everybody pulls tightly enough to just back out into one lane. And the area of the square is in a designated historic district. Now, this is a district, it's not just an amalgamation of buildings. In my opinion, the proposal as it was presented tonight will destroy the setting of the historic district. Nobody put me up to this. It's a setting that's cited by a number of travel and tourist publications and websites as one of the top 10 town squares in the country. So I just think that it's really, really important not to mess with something that frankly works. The rest of the Main Street, I'm concerned with, and if I read it correctly, the southbound traffic coming out of the square onto Main Street. It looked on the plans like it was only going to be one lane that was going to feed to Main Street southbound, and I think that's a problem because you're going to have Roxbury or West Street turning right. You're going to have traffic coming that's going to come around from Washington Street, from Court Street, and I just don't think one lane southbound is going to do it. I also think that narrowing it, and again, if I read the plans correctly, to one lane south of Emerald Street to the Winchester Street Rotary, it's what it looked like on the plans, and that didn't make much sense to me. Now, I don't know in your parking survey if you looked at the number of spaces that are actually leased in the various parking lots, because when I go downtown and it's in the afternoon or if it's midday, I have a real hard time finding a parking space because so many of the spaces in the parking lots, whether it's the Colonial or Gilbo or Wells Street or wherever, they're leased out. Now, I don't know who they're leased to, but it really, really cuts down on the available parking spaces for the public. So it's really hard for me to believe that there are excess parking spaces. One of the other things I haven't heard mentioned either tonight or previously is the cost and the impact to the taxpayer. I don't know if the city has estimated the cost of the project that's not going to be covered by grants or any kind of external funding. I don't know if the city's calculated what the increase is going to be or the estimated increase on the water and sewer users. I don't know what the expense may be annually and an increase in the property taxes as a result of whatever bonding is done for this. I'd really like to see all of this addressed before anything further happens, because we end up paying for it. And finally, I really hope that the council does see fit to have this go through the committee process and the standard for any other major project that the city has undertaken. I know it's easy to brush us off. I'm not an engineer of any type. I could never pass the math. But then the majority of the city council isn't either. And I know we have to rely on outside experts to come up with ideas, but, you know, not every reimagining should become the reality. But thank you anyway.
Thank you, Court. Kendall Lane, 5 Hastings Avenue, Keene. I'm not a traffic engineer, nor am I an urban planner, and I'm not speaking as an urban planner or as a traffic engineer. I'm simply a citizen that's concerned about downtown and about the future of downtown. This is more than just an infrastructure project. We've had a lot of discussion tonight about the details of why we need to redo the water lines and the sewer lines and the stormwater lines. I understand that, and I think that that's important. But that's only the beginning of the process, not the end of it. The end of it is what you put back. And what you put back is important, and it's important for the future of this city. And we're not going to dig Main Street up every few years. We're going to dig it up once, so that what you put back better be prepared for the next 40 years, because our future, the future of this community, the future for everyone here, unless we want to become Claremont, we need to be very emphatic about what our future is going to be right here in Keene. That's what this project is really all about. I just want to reiterate a couple of comments that I heard from Stantec about why we're doing some of the changes, because doing nothing is not an option. Anyone who has lived in Keene for any length of time is aware of the fact that Main Street changes on a regular basis. The Main Street we have today is not the Main Street that we had 25 years ago. It's not the Main Street that we had 50 years ago. It's not the Main Street that we had 100 years ago. We talk about the historic nature of downtown Keene, and it is. And when the brick buildings around Main Street were built in the 1890s, 1900s, early 1900s, Main Street was very different than it is today. What we're talking about is what the future is going to be and what we want our community to look like in the future. It's not a pedestrian-friendly downtown right now. In spite of efforts we've made over the past few years to make it more pedestrian-friendly, it's not particularly pedestrian-friendly. Crossing Main Street is dangerous. I know of 4 or 5 instances of people that have gotten hit crossing Main Street. Fortunately, we haven't had any recent fatalities in the main part of the city, but people still get hit because they cannot get across the street, and when people are driving up Main Street, they don't want to wait, and they don't always see pedestrians, so that we need to make the crossings more pedestrian-friendly. We need to make them shorter. On the east side of Main Street, you have to cross 3 lanes of traffic. A lot of us who are getting older can't cross 3 lanes of traffic in one turn of the lights. But nobody's going to wait for us, and we get stuck out in the middle trying to get across 3 lanes of traffic. That's a safety issue that we need to address. When I came down here tonight, I went around the Common. 3 times today I went around the Common. And in each time I came down Washington Street, went around the Common, and had to go out Roxbury Street. 2 of those times I watched people pay no attention to the lights, pay no attention to how you go out Roxbury Street, and get hung up out in the middle of the intersection. Fortunately, the third time, people understood that they have to stop for 2 and not go until there are 2 green lights. But people see 1 green light to go down Main Street, and they just shoot out to go down Roxbury Street. They don't understand those lights. They're confusing. They're not clear, and that whole system needs to be changed. We cannot allow that kind of dangerous situation to continue ad infinitum. You push the light to cross Roxbury Street. You want to cross Roxbury Street, you push the button. Everything stops. Every single light in downtown turns red. It turns red coming up Main Street. It turns red going down Main Street. It turns red going out West Street. Even though there's nobody there, somebody's crossing Roxbury Street. Those lights are atrocious, and we should be embarrassed that they're still there. Be very honest. The last time I saw Main Street working successfully, the power went out. Oh, three or four months ago, the power went out on Main Street, and none of the lights worked. They were just blinking yellow. The traffic flowed so smoothly. Pedestrians crossed. There was no backup. There was no queuing way down to Eagle Court. That's what I'd like to see happen. Get rid of the damn lights completely. I hear people say, well, we don't need bike lanes downtown because nobody rides their bike downtown. And they're right. Nobody rides their bike downtown if they're smart because it's incredibly dangerous. You try to ride your bike downtown when people are backing out right where your bike is going. You want to see somebody get killed, that's the way to do it. If you really want to see changes downtown, and if you want to make it a multimodal transportation area, you put in a designated bike lane. Whether you need one bike lane on one side of the street or whether you need two, I'm not going to get into that discussion. That's up to the engineers and up to the city council. But a designated bike lane downtown that's protected and separated from the traffic is vital if you really want to. We have a world-class trail system around here. During the years that I served as mayor, I had people coming from across the country to use our trail system and to rave about it, but they couldn't go downtown because it's not safe. We talk about the sidewalks. Well, I kind of oversaw the project back in the 1980s when we redid the sidewalks, and then the sidewalks were incredibly dangerous. They were heaved. They were dangerous to walk on. They were a place where you didn't want to spend much time. We redid the sidewalks, but when we redid the sidewalks, we never conceived of the idea of restaurants being located on the sidewalks. That was not part of our planning. That was nothing that we had expected to see in the city of Keene. In the late 90s, that suddenly became something that people started to enjoy. We have a number of restaurants downtown that take advantage of it. The sidewalks aren't designed for them, not at all. The sidewalks are really too narrow for the restaurants that exist downtown. I know of two restaurants right off the top of my head where it's almost impossible to get people side by side crossing in front of the restaurants because there are so many tables out on the sidewalk. We also have restaurants that would like to be located out there and actually want to push out into the streets and actually take up parking spaces and push out into the streets in order to operate. As part of our redesign, we need to make those sidewalks suitable for the use that they're getting put to today, which is in a large measure a place for restaurants, a place for people to enjoy the outdoors.
One more minute?
I'll be done in just a second, Court. I'm just finishing up.
It's always amazing. I get to ask the mayor to finish up.
I promise, I'll be quick. No, my last thing is downtown has changed. It's changed tremendously in the last few years. When we did it in 1980, or in the 1980s, we had 6 locally owned downtown banks. Now there are no locally owned downtown banks. There are 2 international banks, but no locally owned banks left. Goodnose is gone. Miller Brothers is gone. Sears is gone. So many of the large stores that existed then in downtown are gone. They're not coming back. So we need to design a downtown for what's there today. Now Now people are living downtown. Now the upper stories of the building, we did it before, the second floor of most of the buildings were offices. Now they're apartments. Now the third floors, which used to be empty, are now apartments. People are living downtown. People are enjoying downtown. We just built a big apartment complex behind the old middle school. We need to make the downtown suitable for people who are living downtown. It's a movement nationwide, quite frankly, to live closer to downtown. We encourage it, we support it, and we need to make a downtown that is suitable for it.
Great.
So I will shut up now. Thank you very much.
Thank
But as you look at this, don't think that you can just say do nothing. Think of it in terms of what is the future going to be in this community.
All right, thank you, Mayor. To my left.
Roland Russell, High Street, Keene. We like to think of the things we love as staying the same so we can hang on to them longer. But when you dig into the history of Keene, you discover that change is a constant. One example, we owe the footprint of Central Square to the relocation of what was then the Meeting House to what is now the UCC Church. Fences, fountains, flagpoles have come and gone over the years. The footprint of downtown and Main Street has changed over the years. One other constant, though, is resistance. In 1844, the Keene Forest Society proposed planting trees in Central Square. The hue and cry and the bitter resistance to that recommendation to plant the trees and enclose it with a fence was not unlike today. Businesses thought it would interfere with people seeing the signs. They wanted to have the parade grounds that the militia were using there. They wanted to be able to run their wagons across it. It took 7 years before those trees were finally planted. Now, we love our trees, but imagine if we had not overcome that resistance at the time. Our city has tended to do the right thing by these changes over the years, but if we did not change, we'd still have unpaved downtown streets. There'd be no trees. I wouldn't mind having the electric trolleys back, but by recognizing that things are always changing, it's important to consider how we want them to change, not just for today, but for the future. That resistance has always been there, and I had a recent example of that just a few years ago with the Wall Dogs Executive Committee. There was initial resistance from some people, not a lot, but some very strong resistance that painting on the buildings would ruin the historic character of downtown. Hopefully, we proved people wrong. I like to think of the mural project as a love letter to the city, to the history of the city. In the 4 days of the festival was the best and biggest party I've ever attended, and it was neighbors talking to neighbors. It wasn't the en masse pumpkin festival. It was just people wandering around town. Businesses were thriving. We heard from businesses, at least up until COVID, that their business stayed increasing because people were coming from all over to see the murals. And if you're like me, every out-of-town visitor gets a mural tour, and we go to a restaurant or we go to Modest Man. So it continues to build business. The other thing I wanted to share about what we did with the Mural Festival is that we planned for the future of that. Part of our fundraising was targeted for maintenance. The Historical Society has those funds to maintain those murals in perpetuity. We chose paint, the most expensive kind of paint that was donated to us actually, that would last 50 to 75 years if all goes well under normal weather conditions. So regardless of what we feel about the plans and what we want to see downtown be like today, we need to be thinking about what the future should be for the people who are living here 50, 75 years from now. We love the city and we love it the way it is, but climate change is here. We're not pretending the change away. A lot of the plans in the infrastructure will help us mitigate against the damages of climate change. It'll help us lower our carbon footprint. It will help us create spaces for engaging with smaller festivals that won't cost an arm and a leg to the organizations trying to put them on, because it's so expensive right now to close downtown. So I'll close with the encouragement for City Council to please consider not just today's needs, but needs 50 years from now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Juliana Dodson, and I work at the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship in Keene. More than 6 years ago, my family and I were living in Virginia. At the time, I was working from home, and we were ready for a next step with my husband's career in timber frame, which, by the way, he got into by reading Ted Benson's books that he found at an old antique store. We interviewed with timber frame companies in other parts of the country as far away as Utah. We visited here for our interview, and it just felt like home. It was the week of Christmas, and there had just been a big snowstorm. The streets were super quiet, really empty. We wandered around. I was gigantic pregnant, trying not to slip. We wandered around and easily crossed the street to the square to see the gazebo, and I kept thinking, oh my goodness, this is like Gilmore Girls, this is amazing. But since that moment, more than 6 years ago, I've never felt that way again about Central Square. I am in favor of the expanded Central Square. I'm in favor of multimodal transportation options, and I'm in favor of the current design for Gilbo. I've heard, part of it is that with kids, if we go out into the square for events, it's really unsafe. There's no containing them. They can just go in any direction, and it's very scary. I kind of avoid crossing to Central Square at all costs. The stress of constantly being surrounded by traffic, the length of time it takes to cross, makes it very unappealing. So I've heard arguments that expanding Central Square would negatively impact the character of Keene. I completely disagree with that. It increases the quaint, warm, friendly character and the opportunities for folks to actually gather in the common. I truly believe that if it were more easily accessed by pedestrians in a safe way, without being constantly surrounded by the traffic and emissions, people would gather there more often, which is the point of a common. The perceived quaint and walkable character of Keene was one of many factors that brought us here from Virginia. Now, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Hannah Grimes Center for Entrepreneurship. My husband works for Bensonwood. We've integrated ourselves into the community. Our kids have gone to the Montessori school, Sophia's Hearth. We've served on boards and committees. And, even with all that, I've seen some horrible comments online about carpetbaggers coming in. And I just have to say, like it or not, we must continue to recruit and retain new folks in our community. From everything I've seen over the last 6 years, the character of Keene is one of resilience and innovation, of gathering and collaboration. These changes lend themselves positively to the character of Keene. I would never blame anyone for asking questions, doing their due diligence, and bringing potential issues to light, such as safety and all of these, and cost and all of these other things. However, the real issues and concerns that exist are solvable problems. Fundamentally, they are solvable problems. There is no scenario in which putting it back exactly as it is should be the solution that we seek. It's not the lid of a box that you can lift up, do the infrastructure, and set it back down. Anyone who has worked in construction or knows someone who's worked in construction knows that it doesn't work that way. And honestly, if the city was not investigating options for improvement, I would be protesting. I would say, why aren't we using this opportunity to change it for the better and do something that will work for generations in the future? It's smart of the city to be looking into this. We would be missing a huge opportunity. We have choices, so let's work together to find solutions that will serve our community for the next 100 years.
Hello, my name is Sue Lefferts, and I live in North Keene. from my point of view, we've only lived here about 10 years, so that I can't take any stand on historic or non-historic, and the expansion of the Central Square up to the church is a debate that, you know, I can't really comment on. However, there are a couple of really quick things that I'd like to say. One is, I think you will find it is a whole lot more comforting for the people of Keene to hear what this is going to cost, as somebody said. But also, if we do the infrastructure and put it back exactly the way it is, what is it going to cost, and how much it's going to cost with the changes, and if there's a difference, how much is that going to be, and what is that going to, how is that going to affect the tax rate and water rates and all that sort of thing. I think it'll become very clear that to plan for the future is going to be relatively inexpensively. If you do that, but make it clear to the people, you know, of the town, so they know what we're looking at. Second of all, I totally agree with the bike lanes. Of course, nobody rides in downtown Keene. You have to walk on the sidewalks. You have to walk your bikes on the sidewalks, and nobody wants a 12-year-old kid riding down the middle of the roads with cars backing out. I think that's a long needed change. And then thirdly, my biggest concern is what happens. My vision of Keene is simply that I come down Main Street going north, and I have to go around Central Square to go out Court Street. And it's always that backup which you discussed. And I'm not sure that the rotary, it's unclear to me whether that rotary is going to really ease that problem. And it's going to be a real problem, especially turning onto Roxbury Street, you know, and then trying to cross the street, you know, to Central Square, that crosswalk just beyond Roxbury Street. I don't see how that's all going to work. And it has been no discussion about what kind of, if there's going to be any lights. I assume there's going to be no lights. And I would like to see either for somebody to explain to me how that's going to work. I don't see that it's going to ease the problem, and that's the biggest problem we have right now, is that back up down Main Street. So I think that's another issue that if you could address, it would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and councilors. My name is Kathleen Jerome. I live at 37 Church Street, so I'm on Railroad Square. I want to thank you for your service, thank you for your attention, thank you for the detailed efforts that everybody has put into really considering the future livability of Keene. I recognize it's a difficult decision that you have to make, and I support the committee's recommended improvements with no delays. Infrastructure is critical, let's do it. My points, I could speak to so many of the places, and everybody is speaking very eloquently to them. So my 4 points tonight are on livability and walkability as a downtown resident and a homeowner. So I grew up spending time in Stoddard. I remember Keene very fondly. When I came back to the area just a few years ago, I specifically selected Keene because I found a home that gave me walkable access to everything I needed. I walked to the eye doctor today. My eyes are still dilated. If I look loopy, that's why. I found a home where I could get to everything I needed, and it was wonderful. I also have access to the rail trails, which are terrific for my fitness choices. So I can park the car and just walk. I can support all the local businesses on foot, and I do. I think you'll find that the people who are living downtown are much more likely to shop downtown because it's so much easier than getting in your car and going out to a big box. So I go to Ted's, not Dick's, because of that. So just me. The 4 points I have, I think property owners will benefit from these improvements. I moved from a city where I lived on a major street that went through the very same infrastructure procedure. They dug it up for their 100-year-old pipes and conduits replacement. When they put it back, they improved it. They improved walkability, viability, the lighting, the bump outs, the traffic calming, the trees. They made it beautiful. When I sold my condo, the market in that neighborhood had increased considerably, and I was very happy. This really benefits property owners. The value will be there. This will add value to owners. The community will benefit. Keene has demonstrated their attention to policies that support population health. The Complete Streets Resolution of 2015 is one of those things. This plan incorporates a lot of those recommendations, and I appreciate that some of the other recommendations were detailed by the plan folks here. Making the healthy choice, the easy choice for everybody is the right thing to do, and it's the right thing to do looking forward. So when we suggest that there is parking available and people can walk a couple extra blocks, well, we're all getting a few more steps in. As long as we protect the handicap parking spaces for the people who cannot do that, I think it's a wonderful, viable option, and it's a very wise move. The downtown businesses will benefit from pedestrian traffic. When we can attract people to the downtown, to a beautiful and viable downtown, and people can just walk around and visit the stores, they're more likely to stop in, they're more likely to buy something. As Reverend Worth said earlier, and if there's a restroom available, then sure, that makes you stay a little longer, right? So the festivals and the wonderful events in Keene that bring people downtown, the Snow and Ice Festival most recently, I looked out my window from my condo and just saw so many people flooding the downtown all day long for that. And I think that's what we want. That's what we want to encourage, not driving through. And finally, the pedestrians will benefit. Everybody speaks to the safety. I just want to underscore that. Crossing the street should not be a double jeopardy ×6 by the time you get across the square, or by the time, for me, I cross Railroad Square to Gilbo. You know, as I go across to go to the Colonial or go to Ted's, I shouldn't be worried that I can't make it across. It's just crazy what we have. I think, you know, the comments about things not being broken, I would say that is definitely broken. And so I support the raised platform at Railroad and Gilbo. I think that will make it more visible. Also, making the rail trail more visible as it goes through downtown will help a lot, not only to the visitors who don't know where to go for the rail trail, but for those of us who use it, it'll make it safer for everybody. So this will be safer for both pedestrians and bikers, and probably the drivers as well, because they can see more clearly. Nobody wants to hit somebody, I'm sure of that. So I close by saying that a vibrant and walkable downtown is a valuable asset. I think it's the future of Keene. I think it's a great investment, and I encourage you to make that decision and consider the health of our community a little bit more than the shape of our park. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Billigan. I live on Court Street. I have a couple of questions for Stantec, and I wonder if we could look at the slide again that shows the final design for Central Square. Especially the one with the dimensions on the roundabouts, if you have that.
How far back? Out for which way? Down?
No, that one will do. That's good.
Okay.
That's good. I was looking at the design of what's called a mini roundabout, and it's U.S. Department of Transportation says a mini roundabout has to do with the diameters of the circles in the roundabout. Ed, when you were talking about the north-south dimension, you used a figure, I think, of 150 feet of width there, but I think the critical dimension is the north-south dimension, and especially the loop that runs just tangent to the Commons and just kisses it there. There you have 145 feet east and west and 105 feet north and south, and I think that's why the Department of Transportation regards that as a mini roundabout. But now you can see that there's also evidence of Central Square needing a little haircut there. That looks like another 10 feet or so has to be trimmed off. But it's that northbound lane that has to veer to the right, then go around to the left in order to go up Court Street, that I think is a bottleneck. And I'd like to see what you think about that. In your explanation, Ed, you said that was really a spacious circle, but in fact, it's smaller than any of the other roundabouts. Now,
I think you make good points. However, we wouldn't really consider this a mini roundabout by any means. There's a lot of function that involves this, just the general size of this. You're right, that 105-foot dimension, I would say that you see the shape is more egg-shaped, or it's just truncated to the north and south, mainly because of a really pretty significant design constraint, we thought, which was Central Square, the existing common.
but you're not really holding that line anyway in this case. You're showing that that needs to be adjusted in order to make the 105-foot dimension work.
That's correct. That is correct. And so let me just address the deflection that you're talking about in terms of the entry. One of the things that we thought was really important is, and that's part of what contributes to the traffic issue today, is the lane arrangement as you approach the intersection at the signal. And in that long queue that we see that's basically in this right-hand lane, the existing approach is essentially 3 lanes at Roxbury. As we constrain this into 2, we're using this to split out. The right lane would be a Roxbury-Washington corridor, and the inside lane would be a Court or West corridor, which would split that traffic out.
Mm-hmm.
We think that there's enough space in here. These are wide lanes. They're single lanes, but it's deflecting that traffic. That deflection does 2 things. It processes the traffic, and it processes the traffic at a very slow speed. We want that design speed to be less than 25, even preferred to be 20. Slow everything down, make it manageable, and manage the queue. So we do think that by any means, this isn't a mini roundabout. You could use the term maybe compact roundabout just because of its squashed shape.
I thought you called it a mini roundabout on your first presentation. Am I incorrect?
I wouldn't call it a mini
Okay,
roundabout.
whatever. So what happens when a 10-wheeler makes that turn and goes north and around that circle and tries to go up Court Street? Or a large truck, does it? I mean, there's a pinch point there that's pretty small. It's 1 lane wide while you're making a sharp turn to the left and then to the right.
Yep. So the lane width, and unfortunately it doesn't show well here because this is just a small scale graphic, but this gray area is what we call a truck apron.
Yeah.
So which is very similar to all the other, the white or the gray in all of these. The trucks will use this. And if I can go to, let me just, let me share, this is probably a better view of that. Because this is really a truck that needs to use that truck apron. In this case, they might not if there weren't a car here, but it's designed to do that. So you can see here, this graphic is a little bit better because this is more to scale than that visualization. You can see how that lane width is really widening out when you get to this area. This lane is much wider than the approach lane, and that's starting to utilize all the space that a truck or a fire truck would need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, the reason I bring this up is because of what you said a moment ago, and I'm glad to hear you say the word speed, because I haven't heard the word speed very frequently in all of these discussions. And, you know, it's important to note, I think, that at 20 miles an hour, if you get hit by a car, the likelihood of you dying is about 15%. At 30 miles an hour, which is our stated speed limit, the likelihood of you dying, a pedestrian dying if he's hit by a car, is 45%. And at 40 miles an hour, it's 85%. I think that's a horrendous number to face in a town that has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit where people frequently go 40. I think we've all seen 40-mile-an-hour traffic.
That's really important, and there was a comment before about, you know, the concern about the single lane departing the roundabout. The 2 lanes pick right back up here, but again, the concern of speeds coming out of the roundabout, we don't want this to be an acceleration zone right in here. And that's why there's continued deflection before you open up to what is the two-lane roadway.
Yeah, well, that's good. I think that's good, but I'd really like the city to make a statement about speed in the downtown and what can be done to control speed. It's apparently difficult to enforce, but there are enforcement methods. And if we don't enforce speed, then we're looking at some very stark statistics. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Adam Topfer. I live on Winchester Street here in Keene. I actually grew up in Keene, right on Court Street, just a couple blocks from Central Square, so I spent a lot of time downtown, as I'm sure most of everyone in this room has. I love this town and I love our downtown area. And it's actually just one of the reasons I moved back here recently after a few years away. I'm speaking to you as a resident of Keene and as a community organizer that supports this preliminary design. And I'm going to speak as a resident first. Our downtown is a beautiful area, but there are parts about it that just don't work. It is dangerous. People drive too fast. The crosswalks are far too long. Crossing of a number of lanes at one time is really, really dangerous. Nobody really knows how to drive around Central Square, unless maybe you grew up here and you went to driving school in Keene. Because driving school in Keene, you take a whole day just to learn how Central Square works, because nobody else knows how to use it. This argument of it's not broke, let's not fix it, that doesn't really hold any water, because there are things to it that are broken and should be looked at to change. I also run a nonprofit in Keene called Keene Pride. We put on the Pride Festival that started just last year, as well as about 30 other community events the whole year. And events and programming will be critical for the prosperity of our downtown in an area of changing retail habits. With the rise of e-commerce, downtowns need to adapt, selling not just products and services, but also unique experiences that can't be simulated online. Festivals, performances, pop-up markets, parades, and other in-person programmings will be key to drawing both residents and visitors to downtown to go to the downtown businesses. And right now, it costs about $15,000 to have a festival downtown. You have to shut down streets. It's really difficult. It's difficult for the residents driving around. If we didn't have to do that to the extent that we have to do it now, for instance, with this new design and the added green space that we have on Central Square and on Gilboa, that would alleviate a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of issues for residents when festivals happen and costs for organizers. This will be really tough for the community, especially it'll be tough for downtown businesses when this is happening. And I think we all need to make a commitment to all businesses downtown that we will go. When this is happening, we will deal with the construction and we will go downtown and go to those businesses. I personally cannot wait for this to be done. Dining downtown is going to be so much better than it is right now. I don't like dining downtown and being right next to cars, and cars are flying by or cars are parked right next to me. In any event, I support this, and thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Dan Scully. I had an architectural office in Center Keene for 26 years. I'm dismayed by what's not shown. Stantec showed a very good option for simplifying the traffic around the Central Square. That was in their early work. They had a way of getting it down to a more manageable 2 lanes around. They're not showing it. And we have letter after letter in the newspaper supporting maintaining downtown the Central Square. And there is no talk about it here. In due time, equal time, I would think you'd show that both. This is coming across as if a decision has been made to do this scheme. And it's not responding. City councilors, I would suspect you want to respond to your constituents who are writing these letters. about the Central Square. I'd also like to say about Central Square, I support the option of maintaining it and simplifying down to 2 lanes, because I think this, in real urban planning, isn't all just done by traffic engineers. It brings into cultural things, lots of history, and the grandness of our Main Street demands a grand oval. We have the granddaddy of all ovals right now. And I think that is worth maintaining. The scale of that is I think what we have now should be maintained. And to do that, the first things you were talking about and the first goals, we're talking about maintaining image and character. I think that Central Square and the nature of it is part of our history and certainly our image and character. I would also like to say I support very much the raised table intersection between Gilboa and Railroad, and I would like to address a little bit. The other thing I really support is the event space plan, the covered event space plan for Gilboa Avenue. It's shown on some of the plans, and that addresses I don't think that the proposed changes to Central Square are going to really make events a lot easier. The farmers market's not going to pull their trucks up onto that square. They would go to a place like the proposed covered event space on Gilboa Avenue. I think the real focus of setup event spaces will probably become that Gilboa Avenue space. And Central Square won't need the same kind of setups. It'll still be the most crucial center of our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Christopherson, 28 River Street, Keene. I've spent over 20 years underneath the sidewalks working on your underground electrical system downtown. So I prepared something here. I'm going to try to stay on task here. A few years ago when I heard about a possible restructuring of downtown because some of the infrastructure work needed to be done, I thought it was a good idea. It was mentioned that if you're going to dig it up, why not fix on top at the same time? Possible changes that ran through my head was possibly getting rid of what I call the tree islands in the sidewalks. These are those raised granite curbs with green space and trees planted right in the middle of the sidewalks. Kind of makes sense to get rid of those while we have everything dug up. It could accommodate more pedestrians and pedestrians with their dogs. It would make movement easier for handicapped people, have more space for outdoor dining, and even make more room for our great outdoor events. I figured while you've got it dug it up, you could rebuild some of the electrical pedestals. Those were provided a decade or so ago so event vendors could utilize electricity on the curb. And I figured while you got it dug up, maybe rethink some of the trash receptacles and sidewalk bench areas. I figured while you got it dug up, you could also provide better drainage, as there's a few low-lying spots that flood during heavy rainstorms. That's what I figured a few years ago when I heard about this project. Last fall, I heard on WKBK that if I love my downtown and that I wanted to have a say-so in the design, I better start paying more attention. I did. I educated myself as to what was proposed with the plans that were online. And I did. And my jaw hit the floor. Nothing what I had envisioned in my other plans. I couldn't believe some of the designs that were proposed. It looked more to me like a downtown redesign that while you're at it, you might as well dig up the infrastructure beneath it. I went to the meeting in December where the mayor assured us that the public would have a say and that nothing was cast in stone. However, the next day I heard from the ad hoc committee pushed forward the plans that had made my jaw drop. I don't believe the ad hocs listened to the majority of the public at the December meeting. Several years ago, I promoted and voted for a younger set of councilors and mayor because I was unhappy with the city government's deaf ear to John Q. Public and his spending habits. I figured maybe the young guns would do a better job listening to John Q. and not tax me out of my home in the future. Please listen to me. I am begging you that you do not go forward with these grandiose plans. Rebuild the underground infrastructure and make small tweaks to the downtown we have today. Thank you.
Good evening to the members of City Council and City staff, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this important topic. My name is Drew Bryanton, 30 Nelson Street, and I am the chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Pathway Advisory Committee, also known as BPAC. I'm in favor of improving bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. I lived in Keene for 9 years after living and working in many towns across the country. My wife and I first visited Keene in 2012 because we had heard about Keene and its extensive trail network. We rode our bikes for the day and had dinner at a local restaurant. In today's terms, we were the epitome of recreational tourists. Then we came back and explored a different trail, this time on skis. Then we moved here, bought a house, and started a family. At one point, I had a job in downtown Keene and rode my bike to work every day for a year. Looking for an opportunity to provide feedback and advocacy, I joined BPAC. Serving as an alternate, a member, vice chair, and now chair, for the past 5 years, I have attended BPAC meetings to provide feedback to the city of Keene on bicycle and pedestrian issues. Over that time, we have discussed and advocated for numerous bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure improvements. Recently, the Amy Grant Park Ave loop was completed, which creates a bike-ped-friendly 4-mile loop incorporating existing rail trails, separated multiple-use paths, and bicycle lanes. In addition, BPAC has conducted over 30 bike and pedestrian counts in the past few years. Many times I would count with my 7-year-old daughter helping me. We would count the number of bicyclists and pedestrians that pass through a given intersection over a 2-hour period in all 4 seasons in all types of weather. Finally, the entire BPAC committee, in collaboration with Parks and Rec Department and downtown Keene business owners, participated in the Downtowns and Trails program, the results of which were presented and accepted by the City Council. Led by the UNH Extension Department, this program performed an economic study to explore actions that can be taken to improve economic vibrancy, especially when it comes to connecting the rail trails with downtown. The study found that while Keene has much of the trail infrastructure in place, the actual physical connections and community connections to downtown Keene can be improved. The bike and pedestrian infrastructure improvements proposed in the downtown project create this important connection to downtown. Keene is the hub of our popular rail trail network. As such, the downtown space itself must serve as a gateway to the great network of trails and paths that Keene has to offer. When this physical connection exists, it creates the opportunity for increased economic development. Such economic growth comes from recreational tourism, as more visitors spend money on lodging, dining, and retail. Economic development also comes from local residents and patrons that spend more time and money in downtown stores when they are on foot or bike. Finally, improved bike and pedestrian infrastructure supports a strong working economy. Many members of the local workforce don't have the means or desire to purchase and maintain a car. Creating multimodal transportation access to downtown provides a recruiting and retention advantage for employers. I mentioned the work of BPAC members and other collaborators because it's just that, work. Each of us has made an investment in bettering the Keene through the observation, data collection, and collaboration. And through this work, we have debated the options and presented recommendations to City Council. Rather than remain uninformed and dismissive of all change, we have intentionally engaged in this project and sought to understand how Keene can be even better. Downtown will be dug up. However, there is no increase in the time or cost required to build it back in a more welcoming, inclusive, and economically advantageous way. I'll remind everyone that each person walking or cycling in downtown is one less person driving and parking. Tonight, I encourage City Council to consider that even great things can be better. Hard work and change are required to get there. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jean LaValle. I live in Ward 3, and our counselor is Andrew Madison. I wanted to let everyone know that I actually live at the beautiful Wright Estates. Our one of the condo complexes of Keene. We have 89 units there. We are totally independent of the Keene community. However, we support Keene with a lot of our tax dollars. In researching a lot of the proposals, I really haven't heard much about the cost to the taxpayers. I'd like to address that. I was very excited to hear about the consultation with the arborist for the trees. At the Wright Estates, we have 32 different types of trees. So we're very concerned about the trees downtown as well. It's very exciting to hear that the arborist has been consulted, and hopefully they will consider his recommendations for those trees, the ones that need to be cut down and the ones that need to be replaced with the type of tree specifically, hopefully recommended by the arborist, and also the distance of the trees to be planted a distance apart. As we have experienced at the Wright Estates, many trees that were planted too close together to our buildings, and so now 35 years later, we're having to do a lot of cutting down and replanting of some of the trees because they were not planned accordingly. Also, I'd like to address the cost. I have not heard a lot about the cost of this project. Basically, just a $7 million price tag. The grant, from what I understand, is only about $750,000, which leaves about $5 million for the infrastructure project and over $1 million left for the taxpayers to assume. That leads me to believe that the water and sewer rates are going to go up, and I'm sure that our tax rates will go up as well. I would hope that the city councilors would encourage a cost analysis to be done on these proposals before any decision is made. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Georgia Casamatis. I own a business in Keene called 17 Rocks, 17 Roxbury Street. Thank you all for doing this, your continued work from last year. I've been involved in the process. I've been able to vocalize what I think Keene should look like, and if we're going to redevelop it because of infrastructure, I feel like I was heard, and I really appreciate the process that was presented to business owners in Keene. I felt like I was a part of that group. I feel bad for the folks who don't feel included in this, and I'm glad that you're opening up again for more comment. I love it. It's not as radical as I could imagine it to be. I think there's way more that could have been done. I mean, this is not as radical as it could be. This is, in my eyes, like the best I see a conservative New England town doing. And I'm gonna take it. I'll take what I can get here. And I think that I would love to continue to hear more about the little details, the art, where art can be included and preserved, dedicated art space, sculpture. I also want to know about other cities that you've worked in and the ways that those businesses took the opportunity to bounce back. What did they do? What are the numbers of those businesses, and like how did they see business decrease or increase after? Would be really helpful. I'm sure we're all going to be so glad when this is all done and our business is going to go up, no doubt about it. More benches, because I can't stand very long. Really happy about all the new sidewalks and the widening for people with wheelchairs and crutches. And I think that's all I've got. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yes, Pamela Parrish, and I live at 123 Meadow Road, which is not off Pearl Street. So I would like to say thank you for this, and with others, I'd like to voice support for public toilet facilities included in the infrastructure project, because that is, you know, while it's torn up, you can install them. The second thing is that I wonder if the icons for the seasonal market on the square would expect that the farmers market is going to move, or could they stay at Gilboa Avenue? I don't know where the vendors would park, or where, you know, if they could sell from the back of their vehicles, where would the customers park? I would also like to know if there's any plans for a hop-on, hop-off trolley to facilitate this marvelous walking space I've lived in lots of places, and I used to walk when I was, half a century younger. But I just think that for some of us, and I don't have my cane with me tonight, but some of us are not that mobile and have issues. So, and is there any idea of public transportation? Because the rural character of the Monadnock region means that you're not just looking at the city of Keene. I used to live in Marlborough, and my family's lived there over 100 years, but now I am a citizen of Keene. And people can remember the trolley lines. And the other thing is, I've lived in big cities, and it's sort of like in a newspaper, the most expensive thing is white space. And so what I see here in Keene is that one of the most expensive things is footprint. And are you considering building any parking garages so that you could have vertical parking and not just count, 1, 2, 3, 4 here or there? I think that way you can accommodate more people coming in. There was an event at the senior center the other day, and there's very little parking there. And I asked the lady about it, and she said, oh, well, you could park down by the ice arena and take the city bus. Well, that runs once an hour, people. Hello, I could maybe get to the pharmacy, maybe get some groceries, but that would be it for the day. And I would have used up, 4 hours, 3 or 4, it's, anyway, please give that some thought. And I have been around long enough to remember that once one of the Main Street upgrades was questioned because Keene had the widest paved Main Street in the world, and people were afraid they'd lose their pride and designation. We have to move on. I think that changes are important, but those are just some things I'd like to see addressed. Thank you.
My name is Sandra Whippy. I live at 233 Paco Avenue here in Keene. I'd like to speak on the issue of public bathrooms again. This huge project under discussion has many facets, and many people are involved in the decision-making. We share the concern to protect the intrinsic value of a beautiful downtown with appropriate amenities. I bring to your attention that among those amenities should be concern for the facilities of public bathrooms. We're all aware that most cities contain facilities accessible to the public. Several years ago, I did some work with a local civil organization called Monadnock Interfaith Project, which has been mentioned here several times. One of the interests of our group was to work in depth, particularly with those who were struggling with issues of basic needs. We carried on an in-depth assessment with a group of people who regularly access the offerings of the community kitchen, and over again it was expressed that there are not adequate bathroom facilities downtown, especially after hours. I'll be 87 next month, and as some of you have noticed, the elderly often need bathroom facilities. I hate to talk about these things in public, but it's kind of like returning to our childhood, and sometimes these urges are indeed urgent. I know from experience of 30 years in New Hampshire classrooms, kids need to pee at the darndest times. Last summer, I stood at my sink doing dishes, and a family was walking by my house. Mom and son evidently in serious discussion as he hopped up and down, and Mama kept shaking her head. No, we're almost home. Finally, she rolled her eyes and gave up, and he slipped his britches down, and in a second, this little 2-year-old peed in my front garden. If you don't want him and others with urgencies to do it right there on the pretty flower borders of Main Street, please provide an easy access for all of our residents somewhere nearby. As this renovation project moves along, some of us will be watching how the city does or does not address this normal human urgency. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Waters. I am a self-employed business owner downtown, right in the square, above from the Stage Restaurant with Betsy. I don't think it would be unfair for me to say that March 2020 irrevocably changed all of our lives. Many of the businesses that are a part of the heart of Keene, including my own, not trying to be braggy, but anyway, were permanently altered when this happened in a negative way. And honestly, it's a little bit upsetting to hear that so many people who weren't even going to be directly impacted by this, who were those of us who are downtown were surprised by this. It really kind of sucks to hear that we didn't get to be a big part of that project either. Because honestly, this will be a nail in the coffin for us. Mm-hmm. It will. I mean, I am not opposed to change. I'm not. But in my opinion, this project doesn't properly address the issues that our businesses will face. And we're a really important part of downtown. We are. So honestly, what I really want to know, obviously besides the money issues, is what's going to happen while this is going on. Honestly, like, what are we supposed to do? It's already hard. I mean, downtown is not perfect. I don't think anybody is saying that. But I also don't know that this is good for the businesses, especially after all of us have gone through a COVID pandemic. I mean, it's kind of hard to not even take this as a slap in the face. I mean, people keep mentioning the way that this will impact restaurants in a good way, which, I mean, some of them disagree with that too. But what about all the rest of the businesses on the square? What about the businesses around the square? You know, how long is this project going to take? How long are we going to get help for it? Financial help for all the businesses? We will lose. We will lose customers, no matter how loyal they are, genuinely. Not only that, but our community could have done so much more for everybody, obviously. It was really disheartening to see how much people claimed to care right as it started, but we're still struggling. Not just businesses, but individuals too. And yeah, safety is really important, and I do agree that things could be better downtown. But I just can't fathom how, potentially ending, honestly, conservatively, 25% of the businesses downtown is going to be good for everybody. I don't see that. And honestly, this part I say as somebody who also is physically disabled. I am happy to see that some of that is coming into mind. I am, but I will say that if anything, this, and like I said, this is coming from somebody who is disabled, I don't think this is going to be the right thing either. What about all of the buildings that have been grandfathered in to not follow safety laws, first of all, but also accessibility laws? What if some of the buildings downtown had a fire, we'd be at real risk.
We would be dead.
Yeah. And that's not just, a disabled thing either. That's an everybody thing. But it really sucks how often the disabled community gets left out of these plans. You know, you've addressed some of it, but I really think that this particular design for the square is not really going to be better for us. It's not. And, you know, that's just me, but basically I'm hopeful that these issues that I bring up and other people bring up resonate with you guys in a way. I don't want to have to move from downtown. I like where my business is. I love it down there. And yeah, it could be better, but honestly, I will say that I feel more, you know, like more roundabouts aren't exactly great either because people already don't really know how to use them. No offense, but they're kind of a pain already. So honestly, I just wish that, you know, we had been a part of this process, the businesses who are actually downtown and who will be impacted by the traffic that this will clog up while it's happening and probably after. Like I said, I'm not opposed to change, but it needs to be done differently than this. It really does. And, you know, when there are so many other things that this money could be spent on addressing, like inequity, you know, like all of this, the issues downtown businesses already face and have faced for the past few years, it does really, it's really disheartening. It is. So, thank you.
Good job.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Stevens. I was born at Elliott Community Hospital a few years ago, and I have lived my entire adult life in Keene. I'm currently a resident at Ward 2. I've written a 10-minute letter that I'm not going to read. Some of what I've heard here tonight, I like a lot of what I heard here tonight. I like a lot of what Mayor Lane said. I like a lot of what Dan Scully said. I like a lot of what the woman who talked about the historic district said. I served at one time, I was on Center City Committee, and we studied Main Street and Gilboa Avenue and what to do with that. I love the changes that are happening with Gilboa Avenue, what's up there. I love what's happened with Railroad Square. I am a harbinger for change. I love change, and I'm usually involved actively in it. I am opposed to only one thing in this proposal, and it's closing in Central Square. The square, and it's not because it's just that's the way it's always been. It is historic, just like any old house on the National Historic Register. It's historic, and normally a council would be jumping through hoops to make these sort of changes to an historic and prime piece of property like that. It's an out-of-the-box challenge that I think deserves an out-of-the-box solution, and I don't think that that's happened here. I love making it more accessible to bicycles, to pedestrians, eating out. I love all of that, but respectfully, I think that there's a solution to be had that does not involve closing in the square. The only thing I will read here is, and I need to read it, the only redeeming factor this proposal has going forward is that it would be pretty. Yes, from the renderings we've seen, it would be very pretty, and at what expense? It will be at the expense of the elderly and disabled who will need to walk further to go to any of the businesses at the head of the square. It will be at the expense of businesses who will need to figure out how to make up for the reduced vehicular traffic. It will be at the expense of the homeowners along the streets that connect Washington Street and Court Street. These streets will see an increase in traffic from those proposed modifications. And it will be at the expense of every single taxpayer in Keene. I've worked in the construction industry. I've listened to conversations between estimators and project managers. I've seen what happens firsthand when construction costs go up and owners must cut desired features because the actual expense is much greater than the estimated expense. And we've all heard of such projects that ended up costing well beyond what the estimated expected price would be. Are we really ready to embrace that? In closing, I'll say this. I've heard that the process that the mayor and or the council is taking is is not following protocol. This is a historic project. At the very least, honor precedent and send this through its appropriate channels. This is one project you don't want to get wrong. But if the mayor and the council continue to allow this to deviate from normal protocol, then you've already got it wrong.
That was very eloquent, and I am not a public speaker. So I'm Elizabeth Slack. I own B&B Style Salon, or Betsy. I'm directly on Central Square above the stage, and I've been there for 13 years, and I'm nervous, so it's fine if you only half listen. Thank you for your work, and I understand this work being done is imperative. I am also never opposed to change, but these are my concerns and my business's concerns. As of COVID, I only have booth renters or 1099. I have no employees. But there are 6 of us, again, 13 years. We have been following this entire process. I have emailed everyone, just about, as have my booth renters. Just because we haven't been to meetings, it's because we are open from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and we really couldn't get there, but we always followed everything. I'm just gonna say that, because a lot of people think like, well, if you haven't been following, it's been a few years. I know. I understand you did parking studies. However, some of our businesses downtown are open 7 days a week. My salon is open 100 hours a week. So I see everything with the parking or all the issues that you're discussing, which there aren't many. So moving parking may not seem to be an issue, but it severely impacts our accessibility, as you've heard Mary say. I don't expect anyone to understand that if you're fully capable to walk to your destination as far as you want to walk, as far up Main Street as you want to go. The elements that I love most about downtown, along with the beauty of all of it, are the businesses. And it isn't just restaurants. We don't profit from festivals, we actually have to close. And I've done that for 13 years, almost 14 years. I put up decorations for the festival, and then we shut down. Within and around these businesses, we need accessibility for all and for those who are disabled. I'm an artist and a musician. I have always fully supported nonprofits in Cheshire County, and I've been on a few boards. I've run a few boards, especially for events, but we are for profit. We need profit. And we're still rebuilding from COVID, as you also heard Mary say. It is extremely difficult. So this will affect us day in and day out, as with many, many other people. As for the roundabout, I call it the double threat. That's what I call the double threat. There has to be accessibility. I understand that you have an idea of a light, but there needs to be braille. There needs to be a noise alert. 3 of us in my salon are hard of hearing in one ear, at least by 80%. A lot of people rely on even the braille. Please, again, as many people as mentioned, don't ignore accessibility for everyone. So tired of saying that for 41 years. But people will not yield to just a flashing light. It's not going to happen. I've seen plenty of accidents because of a flashing light. It has to be more than that, and you have to do more. If you want art districts and event spaces, I also suggest focusing, I know this is different, but I'm still going to say it, on drug and mental health issues, because I greet my neighbors that live in the gazebo every morning, and I stop and visit people who live on Gilboa Ave, and I bring them coffee every day. And if you have done studies, you would see that this is happening, which apparently no one's noticing, or they're choosing not to. The last thing I'm just going to say is I own and I run a micro farm in Vermont, and I really appreciate the tree studies. I do. That's amazing. What I want to know is, how do you plan to protect the root systems of the trees, not by just giving them nourishment, because that won't save them? Are you going to be protecting the roots separately? I know that's further down the line, but something to think of, because as we know, if you cut into them, you can put all the $1 million dirt you want. You cut the roots and they're dead. So if you remove the root system, they'll die. And that's my point all around. And that Pat Russell would be shaking her head. Thank you.
Hi,
My name is Rudy Bennick, one of the owners of the Stage Restaurant. We're located right on the square. I haven't prepared a speech or anything, so I'll try and keep this short. We do have a lot of concerns about the way this project has been going and the current proposed plans. The first point I would like to make is parking. Parking is important. A lot of us are talking a lot about bicycles and pedestrians, and that's great. But we're not all spring chickens. Not all pedestrians want to walk across the town for parking or to get to the destination. A lot of us live outside of town. I personally live in Sullivan. A lot of our employees at the and customers at the Stage Restaurant come from out of town, around the cities surrounding Keene, and of course we rely on big days that bring many people from outside of town into town. I think you'd all agree that parking is not sufficient as is. I mean, everyone's gone around town, tried to go out to dinner and find a spot. They've had to circle around the central square and find something, perhaps have had to divert to another street, ended up walking to their destination anyway. So I would just like to, put forth to the city, how can you justify, after years of COVID, many businesses didn't survive. A lot of us were struggling during COVID, finally getting back to it now. How can we justify taking parking away from these businesses, which would greatly affect business? I mean, businesses in downtown Keene, they're the lifeblood of downtown. They're the lifeblood of Central Square. There's not going to be any pedestrians or visitors if there's not booming businesses located on Main Street in Central Square. The second thing I wanted to comment on was the downtown, the traffic circle. I just want to be clear. I've lived in this town my whole life, most of my whole life, now for the last 2 years in Sullivan, but I love this city, and I do think this is a great opportunity for change. We do understand that the infrastructure has to be done, and the city is working hard and figuring out how that's going to work. But I will say, it's going to greatly harm businesses. It's going to hurt us no matter what. We just got to say it. For a restaurant, I can speak to that. Having no outdoor tables, being placed in front of a sinkhole with no access and no parking is going to be a really difficult challenge. We don't know how we're going to get through that, and hopefully this community, like it always does, will come together and find some way to support all businesses affected by this project. That being said, and thank you to the gentleman from Stantec as well for doing this presentation, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. The traffic analysis, the way you guys describe the traffic circle, especially with the emergency vehicles, it just does not instill confidence. I would have a few questions, namely, is there any precedent for a 5-leg mini roundabout as the centerpiece of a town? How's that going to work? By replacing the Central Square as it is now, which I should mention has stood the test of time. If it were not for this infrastructure project, we wouldn't be having any of this discussion. We would be leaving it and perhaps looking at ways we can improve the safety, which of course there are probably many. However, that loop offers a very convenient way to access parking for all businesses around the square. And the smaller mini roundabout, it seems to me, is going to be subject to a lot of U-turns, people going in and out or circling around and around, different ways to try and find parking, since we're going to be taking away parking and moving it all around. I'd like to see the input of the fire chief and what his thoughts are. There's been talk about using this space in front of the church and our restaurant as a emergency access space, which a portion of must be kept clear for emergency vehicles at any time of day, I assume. I would just like to, what I think is, I would like to see the traffic report. I would like to know what data you guys are looking at for the traffic analysis, the methods you use, the way you analyze. I think that all should become public. I think we should have access to it, allow other engineers to look at it before we make any hasty decisions about what's best for the town. Because what we get, we're not going to change it. What we get is what we get. And if we want this town to grow, I assume we want to make sure that we can accommodate more vehicles, more people coming to this town, more people moving to this town. A lot of the comments have been great, and we're talking about revitalizing this town, 100% agree. But that's going to include people moving to this place. It's going to include more cars. They're not going anywhere. We need the space to accommodate them, and hopefully we make the right decision as to how they're in Central Square. I just want to reiterate, it has stood the test of time, and it's very important for, to the safety analysis, the traffic analysis. I think all of it should be above board. What we've seen before, there's just a few blips about the wait times on the streets. and then projected wait times for this new mini roundabout. But I think it would really be beneficial for everyone and the public to be able to see and comment on the entirety of the report. So I just would ask Stantec if you could make that available to us, how we can access it, how we can discuss it, to the city as well, how we can access that, and how we can discuss those details, because the devil really is in the details, with the councilmen and with the public, before we make any decisions. Like I said, I really do think this is a great opportunity to make a lot of great changes to downtown. A lot of ideas are good, but we are worried about the viability of our business with this new proposed square. We really do support keeping it the same, but we'd be open to any ideas as long as it can all be above board and we can really see the data that's behind it. That's all I have. Thank you for letting me speak.
Hi, I'm Mark Rebellard. I'm a resident of Keene. I live at 64 Blackberry Lane. I'm going to stick to the script to keep it brief. Like everyone here tonight, I care deeply about downtown Keene. I've lived here for 20 years, and for the past 10 years, I've owned a business on Main Street that employs 16 people. I'm the current chair of the Keene Downtown Group and one of the producers of the Keene Ice and Snow Festival. I serve as a selectman in Keene Ward 5 and was honored to serve on the Ad Hoc Infrastructure and Improvement Reconstruction Steering Committee. In some folks' eyes, that's the group responsible for introducing the changes to downtown. You know, the they that, can put a man on the moon but can't, do other stuff. But we're not they. We're all here for a reason. We're here because we love this place, and change is hard. Change is scary. But the people on that committee didn't introduce any of these changes. We voted them to the council because they reflected what the active citizens of Keene have been asking for years. From 2007 to 2010, the city of Keene engaged, not polled, engaged nearly 2,000 citizens to think carefully about our city's long-term economic, social, and development goals. The information gleaned from that engagement was used to build the City of Keene Comprehensive Master Plan that was released in 2010. Things like wider sidewalks, trees and benches, a high level of pedestrian and bicyclist accessibility, providing recreational opportunities and sporting social interaction, protect valuable open space resources. More recently, in 2015, Keene approved the Complete Streets Resolution to ensure that any reconstruction project considers not just motorists, but pedestrians and cyclists as well. In 2017, the Keene Downtown Revitalization Study polled over there was more of an engagement. There were committees and panels, but over 600 people participated in a 3-day forum, and I'll read you some of the results. What do you want for your downtown? Space for concerts and outdoor events, 77%. Space for outdoor markets, 74%. Should downtown be more friendly for bicyclists, 73% positive. More public art, 76%. More outdoor dining, 66%. This was in 2017. I think post-COVID that number would go way up. Over and over, when we think about what we love about downtown and what we want to see in the future, it comes down to increased public space for gathering and events, increased green space, safe passage for pedestrians, cyclists, and automobiles. Stantec gave us exactly what we asked for. Fact is, and that's scary. When I first saw it, my jaw dropped too. But when you think about what we've been asking for all these years, and what people want, this is really it, guys. Fact is, Main Street is broken, and it's getting worse. In 1917, we used to drive around that circle any which way, and then we started to finally adopt a traffic pattern. I've seen a picture from the 50s where there's an actual information booth at the end on one of the sides of that rotary. That's not happening anymore today. Those cars have had the opportunity to take over slow and steady until now we've got a park in the middle of an island that really isn't functional. Northbound traffic backs up to Cypress Street and beyond. Cars in the left lane go faster when they're trying, like we've talked about, creating a dangerous situation for people to cross. You have to wait in 2 lights to get from Roxbury to West Street or going south on Main. In that rotary lane, that's that sign that says, "You may proceed after stopping on the red arrow." Who knows what that is? It took me 10 years to figure out what that was. So here we are, an impending edge-to-edge construction project that needs to be done. There's no question, it needs to be done. There are wooden pipes out there. Take a look at what happened in our in the Keene Barber with the wooden pipe exploding and the sewage that was created there. That's a ticking time bomb. It's got to happen. And by the way, as chair of the Keene Downtown Group, the Keene Downtown Group is teaming up with the chamber, and there's all kinds of things that we're going to try to do to help. So if you don't know about the Keene Downtown Group, it's keenedowntowngroup@gmail.com. Please send us a note. Get involved. Finally, the changes to slow traffic to slower speeds and improve traffic flow throughput. I mean, win-win. We are adding 14,000 square feet of public space to Central Square. That's amazing. And when you hear $15,000 to shut down the streets would cause traffic delays in order to put on a festival downtown. Festivals that bring millions of dollars to our community. Literally, I'm not kidding. If you look at all the hotel stays, all the restaurant stays, 8,000 people came to the Keene Ice and Snow Festival. That's a big boon. I've talked to businesses that did, outdid, $4,000 for their day when it's usually not hitting more than 1,000. Finally, councilors, I want to thank you for your service. I know that I don't need to remind you that you have a big job ahead of you, but that's what you get when you pay the $2 fee and run for city council. We're lucky to have you, and we're lucky to stand on the tough decisions that previous officials have made for more space, for more trees, for more possibilities for the future, for future community collaboration. Now it's your turn. These didn't come down to popular votes, and not all the answers were available when they made those decisions. Your job, as I see it, is not to take a tally of yays or nays tonight to make a decision, but to listen carefully with an open mind to the rationale and logic behind each argument. To do any less is to ignore the responsibility that you've been entrusted with. Finally, downtown is not a parking lot or a strip mall. It's not a throughway for cars to cut through, and the character of our great city has never been and never will be dependent on a traffic pattern. Thank you.
All right. I was not prepared to say anything tonight. I thought it's going to be the same format as the last meeting. So, I'm just going to start with the fact that I am from Connecticut. An unfortunate fact, but a fact, is what it is. So I'm known in at least 3 towns in Connecticut as Canoe Girl because over the summer, I took a 22-day canoe trip down the Farmington River, Connecticut River, Long Island Sound, Housatonic River, and on the way back, since the Farmington River is a one-way river, not a tidal like the Connecticut, I had to canoe down Housatonic, then to New Haven, which there is I don't know how many miles, but I took it 50 miles up, hooked my canoe up to my bike, biked 50 miles up to Farmington, where I'm from, and the trail goes from, realistically, New Haven, Northampton, Mass. I did that, and so I feel with that trip I can, pretty much say I'm a very, very experienced long-distance biker. I used to bike 18 miles to and from work, down that trail, and then down a connecting trail which goes through the river valley. When I learned that there was a big trail that went through the entire county, just in my head, honestly, I couldn't even believe that it could be possible to have a downtown that could have, so many pedestrians just going through. And my friend Meg and I, we've just been thinking about it just for fun, like the possibilities of having like a pedestrian-only downtown just from rotary to rotary. And I feel a lot of people tonight have voiced their opinions, and all matter. And I mean, I've talked to everyone who is involved, like from business owners to older people to younger people. Just so, obviously, because everyone's opinion matters, like whether you want pedestrian only or not. And I actually recently talked to the owner of Moe's, who is obviously very much against making this pedestrian only, the construction, which obviously, is a big concern because they're going to be putting a bunch of stuff up just in front of businesses, and, So I felt, even though I am for pedestrian only, I do need to address that. And I think the biggest part in that is, as someone who just loves self-powered travel, who loves just exploring the world on foot, I find that when there isn't traffic, just blocking, your basic, like your thoughts, like I'm trying to walk downtown and like there's cars going by and like I'm not able to like, really think for myself. It's just because I'm so worried and conscious of like all like the busy traffic that's going on. But when I am able to, have like a peaceful environment, like a place where there are no cars or anything like that, I'm more incentivized to go explore. So even if there is like construction going on in front of like a big business, I, in like a peaceful area would be like, oh my gosh, like what's that? And like the curiosity, like there'd be more of an opportunity for me to just go and explore that. Like I'd be honestly like more curious, like, oh, like what's behind that big, machine that's operating whatever it is, trying to fix the downtown pipes. And yeah, so I spent hours on this, honestly, days. And I thought, since everyone's, concerned about the roundabout, which is a huge deal, because the roundabout, it's hard to navigate. Like, no one really knows how to use it. And it's tough because, everyone, or a lot of people who, like, go through downtown for traffic, like, are coming from, like, rural areas in New Hampshire or coming up from Massachusetts, so they're not familiar with the area, really. I say just take out the roundabout entirely. Take Court Street and Washington Street and just have it be so you can go either west or to Roxbury, and the road that connects you on the top, make that, like the main way to get. So say I was coming down from Washington, you can then cut across, go down Court, and that'll be the way to west. And yeah, so, and you obviously said make the whole from rotary to rotary pedestrian only. You would just, obviously close that off, have like kind of gates. So if there were emergency vehicles, you can go, like say they need to go from west to Roxbury, just put down the gates, they can go through quickly, and pedestrians obviously wouldn't be, in danger at all, because they wouldn't be really going in that part. And if, say, like they had to go through, they could just sound their sirens, sound their bells, and just like say, hey, like move up to the green or down to the pedestrian only area. So that would be really safe for people. And so I'm just looking to see if there's anything else I want to say about this now. Oh yeah, and then the second main thing about my design was, because I ride my bike all over downtown, and it's really disincentivizing to actually go on the road in the bike lanes, because it's just the traffic. Again, they're going like 40 miles an hour, so it's scary, and there's ice, and especially in the winter. So yeah, I was thinking, because I usually bike on the sidewalks, which I know you're not supposed to do, but I do it. I'm guilty. I was thinking to just disincentivize people from doing that, to have the sidewalks be made out of brick, because no one wants to bike on brick, like pain in the butt, bumpy. So that would like make it safe for the old people that are walking there, people with like heavy loads don't want to be, crashing in by a bike. And yeah, I think that's it. Because again, so much is said tonight, and I did not prepare anything. I'm just kind of like going off of what I have and what people are saying. But basically, and I want to close with one thing. I was talking to a bunch of people, and one of the things that stuck out to me was I was talking to this old guy, and I wasn't expecting, him to be open to change at all. But what he was saying was, basically, he's like, because I told him, I was like, yeah, like this design is for pedestrian only downtown. He's like, if this were to happen, I'd sell my car, I'd sell my house, and I'd move right there. Because just seeing that, like, a peaceful, community-based downtown would be so valuable that, he thinks it's worth it. Everyone I talk to thinks it's worth it. So yeah, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dave Morrill. I forgot my water bottle. My mouth is really dry, so forgive me. I'm sorry. I live in Keene, just steps away from the square. And thank you, first of all, for hosting this. It's been a great event and lots of great comments. I might not agree with them all, but I hope that we can consider all of the concerns that were shared, especially the ones about making sure our businesses are protected through this process. I'm excited about the proposed plan. I think it's it's very exciting, beautiful images that you've shown us, and I'm really excited about it. I won't repeat everything that fellow supporters have said, but I do want to add that one reason why I'm so excited about it is the traffic flow. I don't know, some of you may remember before the roundabout by Walmart was installed, that traffic backed up so far, all the way down to Main Street and that far in all directions. And as soon as that roundabout was installed, I haven't been more than 5 cars back in that intersection. So I'm expecting similar improvement in traffic flow with this roundabout. So I'm excited about that. That's the one thing that I didn't feel like was addressed in other people's comments that were supportive of the project. So I think I'll leave it there, and thank you.
Good evening. Jay Kahn. I live at 135 Darling Road in Keene. A lot of experience with the city, over 35 years, 28 of those with the college as vice president for finance and planning, a year in the city council, 6 years in the state senate, and with a great appreciation for the city councilors who are here, and I know how much time you put into it, and I just got to say thank you for all that you do for our city, week in, week out. They deserve it. Our thanks, that is. Obvious things. Doing nothing and just replacing pipes is the wrong answer. There are some easy things to move over into the wind column, and we should start to do that and get agreement on those. And whatever the plan is, there are some things that move into that column. Gilboa Avenue is too wide. You could have parking on both sides and still shrink. And it could still have two-way traffic. The platforms across Main Street are a slam dunk, right? I mean, anything that will call attention to those major walkways and help lift pedestrians to a height that they are more visible is a move into the wind column. 3 lanes going north on Main Street, and that confusion there about how you merge, or do you make a loop around that intersection. Anyway, we know the problem. There must be a solution to it to make it easier on both pedestrians and drivers. A bike storage facility, absolutely. That doesn't take a whole lot to move into a wind column. So those are some things that whatever we do, and there must be, given the study that you have done to date, there must be others like that that ought to be in anything that we go forward with. So that relative to the process, this shouldn't be about 3-2 votes or 8-7 on the council. This needs to be something that has a real solid majority of the council, because you are the voices of our population, our residents, the people who shop here, the business owners, and they need and deserve a solid majority of the council to act on this, and I hope you will follow the processes that would consider this through committee to the council with recommendations, so the public can continue to be involved with recommendations as they're formed. So some specifics, because of the $500 million worth of construction that I did at the college, I always began with what are my goals and get consensus around the goals. And there are some here that I have not heard, and it's surprising to me because we have goal statements in the city, oodles of goal statements in the city. One is that we need to be a walkable city. And that's not just Main Street. Look at the streets that connect to Main Street and consider how unwalkable they are. Start with Eagle Court, for starters. But also Dunbar Street, Water Street, Cypress Street. These need to be connectors into downtown, walkable feeders into downtown, and we're not showing any improvement to these walkable, what need to be walkable spaces. And we need to consider some of the other features of our city that are islands, and how can they connect into the city. And that's where Gilboa Avenue, I think, comes in. We've got major shopping investments that are less than a half a mile from Main Street. And it ought to be about how do we connect those. We've got planning studies on that too. And one of those planning studies talks about densifying downtown. And while we've done a good job on the east side of downtown through redevelopment efforts, the west side of downtown is very undeveloped and needs some development to justify the kinds of investment that we want to do. So the west side of downtown is ripe for redevelopment. And we need to anticipate that it can't stay, really shouldn't stay, and won't stay the way that it is today long into the future. So how do you create that kind of, build it and they will come? Because it has to happen. It is the right place for some additional parking. One of the things about parking that I have to start with in this study is there's just not enough right now. So when we talk about minus 14 or plus something with this, we got to start with there's not enough now. And if you can't find it in a study, you'll find it in the perception of the people who come to downtown. So we need more. There was a study at one point about having a garage to the north side or some additional parking north of downtown. We've given that up through licenses and rental spaces, so that's not viable any longer. And yet that's an extension of downtown. We've seen how downtown has moved north. And there's no parking destination shown here, and it really will influence how arterial exits are going to need to be introduced into this plan. Walk-by retail business, that is part of what the west side of downtown might be able to do, is create more walkable businesses because there is parking that potentially could be behind there. And those back entrances don't have to be back entrances, and we've seen what we did with the public library. We put an entrance on both sides. And it helps for the public to see the library, to enter the library. The same thing with stores. If people have multiple ways to enter, and that's the backside of Main Street. And can we create that kind of flow? Walk it sometime. It is really doable to make the backside, west side of Main Street and all of those buildings accessible from the backside. We need to consider larger amenities, whether those are indoor or outdoor, because those are destinations to bring people downtown. And I encourage us with that space that there is to the west side, think creatively, at least to leave the possibility that we don't foreclose it because of other things that we've done. I want to address the Marlborough Street Rotary. It was not the same as this rotary. We reoriented Marlborough Street. The distances back from any part of that roundabout intersection is 45 feet to ensure pedestrian sight lines, driver sight lines to pedestrians. There are a lot of improvements that were made to that to make that successful, and I don't see that as available for the design of this roundabout. And finally, on the bathrooms, it's a great idea, it's a necessity, and the city's going to need to maintain them. So where they are is going to make a difference for the ongoing maintenance and sustainability of those facilities. Thank you all for what you're doing tonight. And thank you to the public for your testimony.
quickly start. We're getting close to 9, so I know there was a young lady in orange over here. I was going to make you the end of that side if you still want to speak. Okay, great. And over here, I think there are the ability for write down comments. So if you have more thoughts, go ahead and do that. So just wanted to kind of keep us on track. So going over this side here.
All right. Ryan Clancy, 51 Dover Street. So I'm in favor of a big change downtown, but I do have some reservations, so I'll go into those quickly just because there's some information that came up. Getting rid of the central Main Street parking I see as one of those big concerns, which kind of ties into the Rotary being built. So I'm in favor of, the expansion of the square, but I think a lighted intersection, because we also have to think about the people coming in to visit Keene. And I think keeping somewhat of what Main Street has today, Main Street proper, is beneficial to the community and for those visitors. That U-turn that you can make before you get to the lighted intersection, I think is helpful, because then that will prevent people from having to, especially if we do expand Central Square, it would prevent that confusion of having to make a U-turn through that area. And so one of my questions I wanted to give to Stantec was, what would it look like to keep that, median parking, but do it all on one side, in particular the east side of Main Street? Would that add space because it wouldn't be zigzagging, and would it reduce the footprint of what is there now, because it's more condensed than the zigzagging that's taking up 2 parking spaces? So I think that should be kind of implemented in there. And as I said, I think lighted intersection and not having a rotary, good for emergency vehicles. I know our emergency responders said that they can navigate through that rotary, but I mean, it would reduce response time, and it would help with the bump out. We wouldn't have the need for those bump outs and taking away that parking, and 2 lanes of traffic there for those emergency vehicles to access southbound Main Street as well as northbound, so that those buildings there will have easy access. So I summarized what I was going to read for my big changes. Oh, and it wouldn't get rid of that little nub on Central Square where the Christmas tree goes, because I know some people were concerned about that if you didn't do the rotary and had a lighted intersection. Safe for pedestrians, safe for everyone and visitors. I'm in favor of the Gilbo Avenue changes, but not for the purpose that some city leaderships champion. The idea of compromising with making green space and event space on Gilbo Avenue to take it off Main Street is against what they oppose for the Main Street changes. By pushing these things to Gilbo, you're closing off access to 90% of the parking that these events and the businesses require. The current design, with the proposed, we need to push parking down Gilbo. So with this design, I noticed that, a lot of people are coming from the south, so traveling north, they're going to have to go up to Central Square to get to Gilbo. So I think trying to figure out a way to get those northbound travelers to turn left on the Gilbo would help reduce that traffic that some folks are worried about. And also, the city, I believe the city gave up the skate park in the land trade deal, so that space is not accessible for expanding that green space, and that parking there is precious. And so, and the events being on Main Street is why people do events. It's not to be in a big open parking lot. Even if you make it a little nicer, it's still a big open concrete ugly area. So my big thing that I'm in favor of, an expansion and enhancement of our historic square to the north, making it a community space. The current proposed design provides more community space, accounts for parking for those businesses, and still allows deliveries, emergency vehicles, and maintenance to access the building fronts. For those worried about changing the historic context of the square, this design puts it more in line. The square has seen many changes since it was built. It was built as a place for the community to gather and talk. A resemblance of what the square is today wasn't built until 1858. Keene's population was only 4,200, and it had dirt roads. Horses and people on foot navigating the area. The bandstand used to be in front of where the flagpole is today. So we see, and as someone said earlier, the church was actually on the Central Square before 1858. So we see a lot of change, but we also see preserving our history, which I find this project does. We are looking at it through the lens of our history, but there is so much more than just our story. Though we are Keene, we don't own it. We need to look at it through the lens of stewardship. The history doesn't lie in pavement or the automobile. The history lies within us and coming together as a community, which this space would provide. And since we do have city councilors here, I would like to, since I won't be able to speak to you prior to your decision on how this project moves forward, it is a historic project which requires a different approach to the process, and I think, and you're looking at ideas that you're certainly legal to do, and I encourage you to do a full council committee instead of going through MSFI because it will get the people's voice heard from the community and show that you truly listen to everyone and everyone's vote mattered. And we have the vice chair on MSFI right now who is touting be part of the process, be part of the process. But currently, it got voted down, but he promised to bring it back every year. He wants to get rid of one of the people's processes, which is the municipal primary. Even though it seems like nothing, it is one of our steps to keep the council in check as well. So, thank you.
Hi, everyone. As most of you know, I'm Dory Maston. I own real estate right in downtown Keene, but also on other sides of Keene. I own the Poorhouse building, where Fritz is. I also own the building beside that, where Med Spa and Creative Inc. is. Above there is got to be, 60 apartments or something. Those are 60 apartments, but probably each apartment has 2 people. So there's a lot of people on just my side of the square. On top of owning the businesses, I started and run Save the Square. I did it because I was asked to. And within a week, Save the Square had almost 1,300 followers. It was immediate. Save the Square had more attention than Hansel got when he ran for mayor, than the city of Keene has. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of opinions. It's a lot of people watching. Stantec had 85 responses. How can that be? Because it didn't go out to all of us. Everyone is not on the City of Keene website, unfortunately. I now am. I wasn't before, but now I get all the emails. So knowing all of that, my background, I'm talking for myself, and I would also like to think that I was speaking for a few of the others on Save the Square's page. The traffic with the egg about. Fry the egg. First off, a 5-legged mini roundabout is not recommended for 5 legs. Most mini roundabouts have 4. That particular egg about is usually approved for about 12,000 cars a day. We have 23,000 cars a day, and every year we're getting more and more. Just something to think about. I asked the city, filed a right to know for a traffic study. Stantec didn't do one. How can Stantec not do one? We saw a map on one of their sites that had traffic on it. Well, most recently, the city manager informed me that it will be released after it goes to council. Why isn't it being released now? Why don't we have that study? We should have that study now so that all of you can be informed when you stand up here and you speak, just to make sure we all know that what we're talking about. We weren't given that. Safety study. No safety study. But what I did hear is, we talked to the fire chief. He comes to the meetings. It's fantastic. But if you do your homework, Keene Fire Department is 50% understaffed. Keene Police Department, 25% understaffed. So during this project, when we want to feel safe, there's traffic going everywhere. If half of the police department and fire department are downtown, holding signs and making sure traffic goes everywhere and making sure businesses can have their sprinklers going, what if someone has a heart attack out in West Keene? Our staff, they've already put in doubles. They're working traffic lights. They're guiding traffic and making sure our sprinklers work. That is just something for you to consider. The businesses in downtown Keene. All of you, I assume by now, have gotten the petition from Ted, McGreer. Over 50 of us signed it. So hearing Mark Rebellard speak for the downtown businesses and that this is a go, I don't want to argue with him. He's a very nice man, but 50 or so of us signed that petition and asked for more time or just totally disagree with it. 3 to 5 Central Square. 35% of the folks that live there are physically impaired. They do enjoy going out. Because they're physically impaired does not mean they need to stay home. Does not mean we should block them from access to downtown. And yeah, the events are wonderful. Keene Pride put on an amazing event. The Ice Festival, amazing. Pumpkin Festival, awesome. We don't need more green space for it. It worked just fine. But by putting in this egg about, these 35% of people can't get to the square. If we put in this egg about, how are they crossing the street? They're just going to take their chances and jump into traffic? They have walkers and wheelchairs, women with strollers. I mean, it's just a lot still for you to think about. As far as we need to accept that everything changes, it does. Life changes every day. Sure. I don't care about but you want bicycle pass? We'll put in, whatever, brings more people downtown. Put in the bicycle pass. You want to plant a tree, plant a tree. You want to crosswalk, we'll make it safer. But that's not what's happening here. We're changing our entire downtown and the traffic. Why do we have to be like all the other cities? Why do we have to be like Concord? We are successful. We have a fantastic, beautiful downtown. They should want to be like us. The parking, I can't speak enough about it. And Stantec, I know you folks aren't from around here, but you've been here several times now. And if you didn't have the privilege to park in the city lot, you'd be parking on Vernon Street too. So I've met with several city councilors, met with the mayor, several of you on that side. Every time you come, you drive in your car. You work across the street. You work across the street. You drove your car. Now you're asking us and our customers to walk from Gilboa Ave? You can't even walk across the street. Come on. Don't shake your head, George, because it's rude. You're our mayor. Have a little class. As far as being a walkable city, like Mr. Khan said, he's right. It should be a walkable city. It should be a bikeable city. And we can make that happen. But it doesn't mean we all need to keep continuing to change downtown. We're taking this extra $3 million, which is the cosmetic stuff. Say it's $3 million, I don't know, the number came out of the air. And we want to do all these great things to downtown Keene. What about all the taxpayers that came out tonight that live on side streets and their sidewalk doesn't get plowed, doesn't get taken care of? They trip on them. We could be spending this money on people who need it, on the outskirts, and get more people to town. They should be able to walk from their neighborhoods into town. Currently, the city plow can't plow Vernon Street. The reason is we bought a new plow. It's too big, doesn't fit on the sidewalk. I think there's a lot of change that the city can make. And we're doing some great things. But as it is right now, this plan doesn't work. It doesn't work. Now, I'm going to go to business side of Dory and encourage you to look at the map and see the traffic coming southbound from Washington Street. That traffic's coming off the bypass. Now, that traffic, anyone coming from that direction that would love to go to Fritz or Poorhouse or Med Spa or Stage, they're going to have to go down that street and turn around at the hospital, come back to get on my side of the street. Now, That's a customer. What about a delivery truck? I've posted many photos, and I just got one while I was sitting here. People say trucks don't belong downtown anyway. They do for local delivery. That's how the appliances for all the apartments get delivered. That's how our groceries get delivered. That's how our equipment gets delivered. What happens? I know that my PFG truck isn't going to come off the bypass, go all the way down to the hospital, well, it'll probably be Maple Ave, try to turn around and come back. And it's not just me. It's Fritz, it's the stage. All of these changes affect every part of our day-to-day business. And it's not like they're just coming through once. I open at a different time than Fritz does, or our Yasso, or whatever. These trucks come through our city at all times of the day. So now, if that's talking about delivery, then you skip to safety. Fire trucks come out on Washington Street, and now, which, as it sits right now, they would come out of Washington, go in front of the stage, so they could access the stage's building, and then they pull up, and they can get in front of Poorhouse Building. With this plan, the fire truck comes out and around, heads down Court Street, and has to face oncoming traffic to get to us. Every 90 seconds, a fire doubles in size. Any delay could cost lives. And the same goes for them getting to Central Square Terrace. We don't have enough facts to make its decision, so how can we expect our city councilors to make one? They're going to do it without us unless we stand up for ourselves. This needs to go to MSFI so everyone can do their homework. Thank you.
My name is Autumn Delacroix. I live on Court Street, and I have lived in or just outside of Keene my whole life. A lot of you have probably seen me walk into Keene since I was 13, up the highway from North Swansea and up Main Street. Now I am one of those bikers that is too stubborn to do the smart thing and stay away. I love this city too much. And hearing the proposed changes made me love it more. The best days I've spent in Keene are the days when Main Street was shut down. We have amazing events, and I'm really excited to see this square become less claustrophobic and alienating, because I don't go into it unless the street is shut down. These events and walkable, bikeable routes appeal to the youth. This is important because earlier this month, I attended a meeting with many of you in which it was emphasized that there is a strong desire to attract graduating college students to stay. The proposed design is vital to do that. But in my time, I've also been struck at a crosswalk in Keene. And in this past fall, despite that, I have stopped traffic to protect a veteran who is struggling to cross the square due to a failure of his electric scooter. I would do it again, but I can't always be there. And I fear for those who will still struggle to cross if it is not adapted. I fear for the children who would never be allowed to bike downtown because it's unsafe. I sympathize with those who only feel safe biking on the sidewalk, despite the $100 fines they face for doing so. Please build the city that you would feel safe having your kids navigate on their own.
My name's Joji Robertson. I live at 40 Dickinson Road. We also own property downtown on the corner of Wilson and Emerald Street. So I have a letter which I will share with the city council members. I'm going to try and keep it brief. I guess I'm multi-generation in this community. I don't know what generation I am, but trust me, the family cemeteries in Chesterfield, My dad's with me here. He's 87, very invested in the community, served on lots of boards, had businesses here. Definitely love this town. I guess I'm not in support of what is being proposed. It's not that I don't want change. I think, much like what Jay Kahn was saying, is there's a lot of low-hanging fruit, things that we can do that will dramatically change our downtown. I don't know that going to this extent is necessarily going to do what we hope for it to do. I know we're talking about event space, but are you saying to the community that this space at the head of the square will now be adequate and we won't be shutting down any part of Main Street for festivals? I just don't think that that's true, right? It's still going to happen. We're still going to close it down. You're still going to need all the fire, all the ambulances, police, all those things. So magically, events are not going to be free for anyone who wants to hold those events. It's still going to cost money. I'm going to run through my list, not read this because I know everybody wants to go home. I guess this is to those who orchestrated the public outreach. I think that it was substandard. The fact that we had a huge group show up January, what was not the last one, the first one that I went to, because nobody knew about it. I'd gotten a flyer, a notice, because I'm a downtown property owner, but quite frankly, it said water and sewer infrastructure. I think everybody is in agreement that that needs to happen. How we put it back is where everybody's getting caught up. I think that there are a number of things that we should be doing. MFSI committee is one. I don't know, when you have such a contentious and large project that is going to impact what our future is, why we would create a new way of going through a process. I'm just going to jump around here a little bit. The center median on Main Street, if I recall correctly, that was sold to us, the parking and whatnot down the middle of Main Street was sold to us as a safety feature because we do have a wide Main Street. 4 lanes is a lot to get across. So it gave us parking, which everyone is in agreement that we need, as well as it was a safety stop for pedestrians. To think that this magic plan is going to slow down traffic, make crossing a sidewalk easier and safer is ridiculous. People who drive cars drive too fast, they don't pay attention, we have cell phones, we have too many things going on, so this is not going to make crossing a sidewalk any easier. It's just not going to. Let's see. You've said that there's been a traffic study. What I'm asking for is a traffic study and or modeling that shows how this system works if it's built. Do we throw up some barricades and test it out and see how it works and make a little mini roundabout before we go through the expense and exercise of building it to find out that there are fatal flaws in this? What happens when you have an event or even just a small Wednesday night music concert down on that green, and you've got pedestrians crossing every single one of those sidewalks at intermittent times? You're going to gridlock that rotary. There's a number of other things that are in here that other people have touched on, so I'm not going to. What I will say is I'm a bike rider. I'm a walker. I've walked a lot of places. I don't know my mileages or which directions, but I've been a lot of places all over the country, okay? And to me, the bike path on Main Street doesn't belong there. I think the bike paths belong 1 block off where there's less congestion, because if this is really about safety, that's going to do it. Putting it on Main Street is just silly. That's where everybody's fighting for a parking space, trying to cross, all these things going on. Put the bike path 1 block off. People can ride, and then if you want to go to Main Street, put those bike parking facilities on those bike paths and let them walk over to Main Street. Makes sense to me. Saves money, saves space. The other thing, and I don't know if you can go to the slide of Gilboa Ave. Is that possible?
Am I going in the right direction? Keep going. Getting close.
Sorry.
That one?
That one will work.
Okay.
So right now, you have Gilboa Ave going out of Main Street. So anyone who comes from the west, and I think that I think I'm right, that most residential and many businesses are on the west side of town. So anybody who wants to access Main Street now will have to go through that roundabout interchange. Right now, we can sneak around Gilboa Ave, we can sneak over around Emerald if you're trying to scoot around town, but if you do this with Gilboa Ave, you're just putting more traffic through that interchange, so it doesn't make sense to me. How does the bus come and pick up travelers if this is, part of our goal is to be multimodal? It just doesn't work. And if you see that the one-way street goes all the way down to James Street, so people are going to get to James Street and be forced to go into the public parking area. And then how do they get out of that? They get out of that on Wilson Street. Wilson Street is substandard right now. I don't think you could push a wheelchair down that road. It's embarrassing, and the fact that it has been this way for so long is insane. We own the building on that corner. Parking is a huge issue because we have adequate parking for our tenants. And since we have Brewbakers diagonally across the street now, and the city gave them what could be 2 or 3 parking spaces, outdoor cafe space, everyone that goes there goes into Mitch's lot and goes into my lot. When I kick them out of my lot, they go to Mitch's lot. It's just going to become more and more of a problem. Parking, it has to be number one. If people can't park, they're not going to support our businesses. And if we don't have healthy, vibrant businesses, we're nowhere. And if you expect our businesses after COVID to survive 3 years of construction downtown and you're not giving them any added parking, it's just not accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't mind changing things, but I think this is missing the mark. I think that if there had been more public input at the very beginning, maybe we wouldn't be quite at odds with those who support it and those that don't. We would already have reached some compromises and understandings and have a better project in front of us. I appreciate Stantec's the work that they've done. They've done what they've been asked to do by the limited group of people that were involved. So I know there's other things, but I think most of them have been addressed, but I think some of the suggestions are we need a parking structure, and I'm told by different people that you guys are working on it. But you don't have the ground, you don't have the money, I don't know what the issue is, but that should be first and foremost. Again, creating that temporary roundabout to see if this plan actually works. I think the raised sidewalks, adding the crossing signals are all great. I personally would like to see the farmers market move to Ashwheelet Park. We're not an urban center, we're not a Boston, we're not a Brooklyn, which different story, but we have plenty of green spaces. There's a parking lot that you could use for Ashwheelet Park to have the farmers market there. Everything doesn't have to be downtown. Part of a community is having neighborhoods, having pockets of different things where different events happen at different days, different times, or the same day, the same time. So I think we need to kind of be open to other alternatives. I do feel like this has been pretty much decided upon. I know that you say that it hasn't been, but the fact that we're only seeing one option here tells me otherwise. So I will leave that at that.
Hi, my name is Sam Jackson. I live up on Court Street, a little after the hospital, and I work on Emerald Street at Fire Dog Breads. It's, I ride my bike every single day. I don't own a car. I ride my bike to get my groceries, to go to work, to see my brother, to do everything, unless I can walk, and honestly, I can only walk to the hospital reasonably. I love using my bike, but I can't tell you the number of times I've had close calls on going down Court Street. The sidewalks are too narrow to support both people walking, especially walking their dogs, and a cyclist going by, which really, and they're not taken care of well enough in the first place, especially this time of year. So my only option really is to cycle on the road with other motorized users, and that's honestly terrifying sometimes. Similarly, I've nearly been hit several times crossing that crosswalk next to Gilbo Ave there. Several reasons for that, I'm sure, but the two that I've noticed is with 2 lanes of traffic going down, there's too much for a driver to pay attention to, and they just don't always see, especially with the way the road cuts in there, they just don't see the people getting ready to cross there. I've had people change lanes right on that crosswalk before. I've had people pull out of Gilbo Ave onto Main Street, not even looking to the right because they're looking at traffic to the left. And I've nearly been hit there almost every time I deliver bread to the co-op, which I do also by bike. I heard somebody mention 30 miles an hour. That is the speed limit in Keene, but if I understand correctly, I think Main Street is 25 miles per hour. And yes, I have seen people go 40 miles an hour down this road, and it tells me that there are traffic calming measures that we're not using, that we really do need to use, and I really like some of the options that Stantec has implemented here, to be perfectly honest. That rotary, the egg rotary at the top, it is so tight for road users that aren't using that truck apron, and that slows people down. People who go around that roundabout at the top, they use it like a slingshot. They go so fast. It's terrifying. I don't want my downtown to be terrifying. My thoughts are all over the place. I do have an order. I want to see younger people be able to use this space too. I want it not to be frightening for a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-old to be biking down this way by themselves to, I don't know, go to a new skate park if we make one, or go visit their friends, or go from here to their job, wherever that happens to be, in the evening. I want those options to be there, and for them not to need a car to get somewhere, because you need a job, you need money in order to buy the car that you're using to get to the job to make the money, and it's a terrible cycle. Similarly, that square up there, I don't go into that square ever unless we shut down the square, because it does feel like I'm surrounded by a cyclone of traffic, and I know I'm not the only one here, but it gives me major anxiety to be in that space, which means when there are concerts there, I won't even go because I know that I won't be okay. There's been a lot of concern about the cost regarding this, and I wanted to mention I'm not a traffic engineer, but I have a little bit of understanding here that the cost to maintain a sidewalk and a bike lane are substantially less than that to maintain a automobile road. the less space that's put into the automobile roadway, the more space we can, the less maintenance we have to put into it in the future, the less it costs for us to maintain it down the line, as far as I understand. And last thing I want to say, somebody mentioned that not everybody wants to walk down Main Street to get to whatever local business, and I really want to ask why. Why don't we want to walk to our local businesses? Is it scary? I mean, I think so sometimes. Is it not pleasing? Is it difficult? And we've heard a lot of that already today. I think it's really important that we take all of the concerns today into consideration. Yeah, thank you all for listening and being here.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Sizo, and I live in East Keene, near the park. And I like to walk downtown. I do ride my bike sometime, but I really don't ride it down Main Street. It's not safe. This is a great event. A lot of information, maybe something that I hadn't thought about, and maybe you all too. I am in support of the new plan. I like the rotary at the top because partially it will slow down traffic, and I was on Main Street going north, and you sit there for minutes sometimes waiting because of just the way it's configured. It definitely needs an overhaul. I also wanted to point out that people who have safety concerns, I don't know what it's called in front of the church in those businesses, but I know in the plan there was a little tan area. It's a roadway and it's for emergency vehicles, right? That is, anything that happens, it has to stay open for that. So I felt like that was taken care of. And I also feel like people have mentioned closing the square. Closing the square to me is really only, the way the plan is is presented here, is only to cars. I don't feel it's an impediment to somebody getting to a business. I think the parking is a little bit, it may not be right in front of those businesses, but it seems very close to me. While the infrastructure underneath is being dug up and everything, people are gonna have to adjust their parking ways, so we will all learn to adapt to new parking spaces. I do think also that, as people have said, there probably should be more parking downtown, which you all know, and we have to address, and it's somewhat a separate issue because of a cost, and this is a certain time frame and everything. I do have a thought on that too, that because parking is tight, maybe somehow somebody can partner with Keene State and somebody creates an app for what's available, parking is available around town. I don't know, I'm just thinking outside the box here. You know, you got a lot of students, you run a contest in the computer science department or some kind of design. So I also, the cost, I do think, you know, as taxpayers, we're concerned about the costs and rising taxes, et cetera. I don't know the figures, but I know that most of the cost is really for the underground part, right? It's not, and we're gonna have to pave roads and do sidewalks. So I think most of the cost, really, regardless of whatever, if this plan doesn't pass and we get 5 others that come up and whatever's chosen, most of the cost is you have to shut everything down, dig it all up, take it away and replace. So I don't feel like most of the cost is above ground. So thank you, and I'm glad we're having this.
Hello, my name is Connie Joyce, and I moved to Keene in 1964. So I've worked here professionally for almost 60 years. I'm part of the Save the Square. I didn't wear my t-shirt tonight, but I have stood on the square 3 Saturday mornings, sometimes in the rain, sometimes freezing. But I do believe that I like things the way they are. So I'd like to read quickly what I've written. I am all for the new service lines, but disappointed in the process. It has felt like our city government excluded the opportunity for the taxpayers to speak. I was aware on January 11th, because I went to a meeting a little over a month ago, that the Heritage Commission and the Historical Society were finally included in our outreach. I haven't heard anything from any member of either of those affiliates. I know that Santec, I have heard, is a good group and a fun group to work with. And I actually read an article this morning that said that you were involved in another, like an airport renovation, maybe Claremont, and you have been for several years. But somebody also told me that you're a US-based Canadian company. Is that true? Okay. So we try to promote local. And I just wondered if there were other consultants that were consulted before you were hired. And I can't imagine the amount of time you have put into this and the amount of time you will still put into this. The estimate that's been thrown out of $7 million seems like not very much money because I just heard that the 100-night shelter has exceeded their budget of $5.5 million to put up one building, and it's nearing over $6 million now. So I don't know where that $7 million is coming from. The information session on January 20th with about 250 people felt like a job fair to me. It was difficult for older citizens, I'm nearing 78 myself, to hear and see information in the 4 separate group settings. Many people left. Instead of the coffee table sized poster boards, it would have been easier for me to preview scale models of the 4 different plans, not one-dimensional, but 3-dimensional. Santec and the city managers need to provide a survey and full impact analysis of all of the retail stores involved in the infrastructure plan. Who will compensate businesses for lost revenue for the 3-year period of construction? Santec has done these projects before and has history from their previous projects. They know the good and the bad impact on the community that they have advised. I would like to have Santec provide the information to the public. This project lacks common sense, and these plans do not benefit the common good of our community. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Knight from Keene. Can I borrow your laser pointer, please?
Oh, it's this thing.
Thank you for letting me borrow the fun green pointy thing. So I'm glad this slide is up because I wanted to talk about the Gilbo Ave parking. Currently, this is one of very few long-term parking lots that are close to downtown Keene, and this one is probably the closest access to the downtown Keene businesses. Now, because this lot is, you can put in the parking kiosk the full amount for the day, so you could potentially pay for at least 8 hours of parking in this lot. This lot is utilized not only by people shopping downtown, coming to events, and business owners and their employees, their staff. It's also utilized by those who live downtown because most of the parking, or most of the apartments that exist above the buildings downtown do not come with parking. And so they also have to find places to park as close as they can to their residents. My concerns with this existing plan, you can see that currently Gilbo Ave is a 2-way street, and there are 2 entrances on this side. If these modifications go through, you are forced to enter in from either West Street or downtown. This is a 1-way on St. James Street. This right here in between St. James Church and this building over here is a private parking lot with a metal gate. There is 0 entry access. This is a one-way from West Street, which is not always easy to get to depending on the amount of traffic at the light right there. And Lamson Street, I'll be honest, I've never seen a car drive down it because it's very narrow and there's usually a lot of pedestrian traffic on it from people walking from the parking lot, from the current existing location of 100 Night Shelter, and from the people walking across it on Main Street. So while I like some of the changes that have been proposed as far as the multi-use zone, I think that's an interesting idea, but I think it needs to be explored further. And echoing other people who've spoken, there's a fair amount of people who live in West Keene who try and avoid all of this to get down to, say, the co-op or the post office. And if you go down Emerald Street, you can't get to Eagle Court because it's directly across the street, and you can't go straight and you can't go left, you can only go right there. And so that leaves you with going down Gilboa Ave to go down Main Street to then turn onto some of the side streets that are accessible. Otherwise, you have to go all the way down to the Rotary for Winchester Street. So this really needs to be reconsidered. Because currently I live in West Keene, and this is the way that I drive to get to this parking lot, and I know I'm not the only one. And having more ways to get to the limited parking that we have downtown is important for several different layers of people that need that functionality downtown. I'll keep the rest of what I need to say brief, and I'll give you your pointer back. My concerns echo a lot of other people that have spoken tonight. One of the biggest things that I thought of right away when looking at closing off the north end of the square was emergency vehicles. Right now, correct me if I'm wrong, our emergency emergency vehicles coming out of the fire department, so that's EMS, fire, rescue, they have the ability to shut down all of the traffic in downtown, turning all of those lights red. Is that correct? And so right now, they have a way to get exactly where they need to go unimpeded. It also shuts off the crosswalks so that people can't cross the roads during those times. With a rotary, and especially if we're looking at rotaries with one-lane traffic coming and going, that severely impedes the ability for those emergency vehicles to get where they need to go. And it's already been stated, earlier tonight, seconds count in an emergency, whether that's a fire, a car accident, or some other life-threatening emergency. And that really needs to be taken into consideration. I'm going to echo the concerns for people in crosswalks. Dear God, trying to get around some of the crosswalks in this town where there's, or not crosswalks, the rotaries, especially that one where Marlborough and Winchester and Maine meet, and you've got a lot of people walking down there for the college. I really fear for some of those pedestrians sometimes because not everyone knows how to properly drive around a rotary. And so one of the suggestions that I would like to make to the council, to the city of Keene, would be better signage in what lane is supposed to go where for the existing rotaries that we do have. For example, I've been in the middle lane, northbound on Main Street, which is, because I had, as someone else mentioned earlier, driver's ed at Keene High at 16 or 17 years old, and I was told that main lane, you aim for that little traffic island, and then you bank around because then you're on the what would be the outside lane to go to either Court Street or West Street. I've had people in the left-hand lane cut me off to go to Washington Street. I've had people in the right lane cut me off to go to downtown Keene. And so I really feel like one of the things that needs to be taken into consideration is until all of this goes through, there's other small things that can be done. I'm all for putting lines back around the rotary, my goodness. And definitely more signs to help people who either live here, who did not have a driver's ed here, or who are visiting here, have a better idea so that we can make the traffic patterns safer for everyone. I feel like there are some smaller common sense solutions that we can find that everyone can agree upon to help move things forward. Everyone agrees the infrastructure needs to be done. I feel like it seems like a lot of people are echoing not making drastic changes to downtown. I love having the idea of an arts corridor and doing something with Gilboa Ave and Railroad Square, but let's not cut off Gilboa Ave to turn it into a one-way. So I think there's a lot of fun things that we can do, but I also think first and foremost we have to consider safety. We have to consider the safety of the pedestrians. We have to, which I feel like the traffic lights do, because all traffic stops so that all crosswalks are utilizable at one time. So that way, if you're hard of hearing, or you have a hard time with eyesight, you hear the buzzer, it's not necessarily just for the walk you're on, it's for all of the walks, which makes it easy to distinguish as someone who might be hearing impaired or visually impaired to get safely across the street. I feel like there was one other point I wanted to make. I agree that we need to keep as much parking in Keene as we can. And while I like the idea of putting in safe bike lanes downtown, we also be mindful that we're not taking away parking that could be taking away businesses from the, our local shop owners downtown. If you've got someone who's got a very limited amount of time and they just want to get in and quick grab what they know they need from the shop and be out in like 10, 15 minutes, if they're driving around and they can't find parking, they're going to say, oh, the heck with it, and they're not going to make the sale. So there's a lot of different people's needs to take into consideration. There's a lot of people's opinions to take into consideration. But I think, for me, I would love to keep the common as it is. I think it's a beautiful historic feature. I used to climb those trees as a teenager. I'm sure I probably would have gotten in trouble for it if I tried to do that now. But I spent a lot of time down there, and I used to walk all over Keene, as a teenager, and I still enjoy the beauty of our small town. And as someone else mentioned, I'm also multi-generational, at least 8 generations in this area. So I'm going to turn it over to this woman behind me who's been waiting very patiently, and I'll pass your green pointer back. Thank you all.
Yep, I'm the last one. I've heard it all. And all of you probably are now reaching the point of being bored to tears. My name is Linda Felder. I live on Court Street in Keene. I am a Ward 3 resident. Yes, let's see, Brian Lake. I wrote you a letter, but you never responded to me. And I think the other person is Andrew Madison. Anyways, I am a native of Keene. My parents were natives of Keene. My grandparents were natives of Keene. I am very much opposed to a lot of the renovations that you are proposing. The main thing is Central Square. The Rotary, as you have it, the little one, is not necessary. Central Square, as we have it now, is a natural Rotary and a roundabout, as you would think. It has stood the test of time. Infrastructure, yes, it should be done. A lot of the things that were mentioned tonight are definitely needed, wanted, and I would love to see happen. But changing Central Square as it stands right now is not one of the things that needs to be done. Blocking off the partition between the church and where the green space is not necessary. The traffic flows well. I have seen things I don't quite understand. The fire department and the trucks coming out of Washington Street. They used to come out of Court Street and go down the side of Main Street to get onto Main Street and go to either West or wherever they need to do. I don't know why it's changed. It doesn't make sense to me that the fire trucks, ambulances, or whatever would face traffic in the opposite direction trying to get to emergency situations. It doesn't make sense to me. And maybe somebody can address it. And I know that most of you have tried very, very hard to take notes on all of the things that were mentioned tonight. And so many people have had absolutely wonderful ideas. I'm not going to rehash them, but I do hope that you use common sense in trying not to change our Keene and Central Square as a historic event. There are people that use the Central Square to protest. You know why? Because it's a very visible place to be. People want to be seen if they are upset about things. People that go out and demonstrate, like Save the Square, with their t-shirts and signs, want to be seen by people going around Central Square. The Pride group also had things going on in Central Square, and that's why they wanted to use Central Square, because so many people could see them visibly. The green spaces could be used for that. Gilboa Ave, Railroad Street, and other places, as well as the Central Square as we have it today. I'm not going to go into more details. You have it all. I know you have written down notes. I do hope that you will consider all of these things that people have said and understand that businesses will go out of business because of the time that it takes to do these renovations. So anyways, that's all I need to say. I want to say thank you for the council, for listening, and for participating, and for allowing the public to come and hear and see what the plans are. And I hope you, as counselors and people that are planning this renovation, have taken notes and will think about what we, the public, the residents of Keene, have said. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are closing this evening. Again, if you want written comments, can be put in the back box, and everyone have a good evening.